What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I am Rockin Robbie Billups Station, and welcome everybody to the debut of Comics Revisited Season 3, now a formatted live show with more guests. Speaking of those guests, well, let's bring in someone who wouldn't possibly be here for this show if we were doing it the old school Season 1, Season 2 way, but it's a new day, it's a new dawn, and by the way, we're talking about New X-Men by Grant Morrison, so we got to bring in the host of my favorite sort of X-Men centric podcast. It's Verno. What's up, my man? From the Cerebros.
Station, my friend. Sort of X-Men centric is a great way to put it, but I would have traveled down to meet you in person, just so you know. So it's not the only possible way. Yeah. I'd have driven all the way to Alabama to do this with you guys.
I would have been like, sorry, bro, studio's full, no ticket. You got to go. Speaking of no ticket, he never brings his ticket on time. I didn't know how that makes sense, but it's Brian, the Brianiac. What's up, buddy?
Station.
Station. Hardcore. That's a hardcore station, my friend.
It is. It is. It's intense.
All right. Speaking of hardcore, the biggest X-Men fan I personally know is Brooks. What's up, Brooks? The mutant mania master of magnetism. What's up, Brooks?
I am master of magnet.
I am master of magnet. You're a fool, Charles.
Welcome to die.
All right. So here we are, and we're going to be talking about Grant Morrison's New X-Men. What was like 2001, right? Yeah, because they destroyed Genosha like right before 9/11 actually happened. It was one of those things. There were a lot of things in comics that were happening that were very kind of scary and spooky because it was kind of like related to that stuff. So anyway, a little bit of history. Grant Morrison was mostly known for his work over at DC Comics, whether it was his Vertigo books like The Invisibles and Doom Patrol and the earlier Animal Man, and of course the JLA run, right? And I think the JLA run's what really, first of all, got me to notice Grant, right? And got me into their work and started really elevating my like 15-year-old brain, right? So I have been a huge fan of Grant Morrison. I would dare you to find a bigger fan. I think I'm more of a fan of Grant Morrison than Grant Morrison is a fan of themselves. But anyway, so when Marvel got Grant, that was a big get. That was a whole thing. Like they stole Grant away, and this started this exclusive wars. And in Grant's book, Super Gods, he talks about it was the start of the exclusive wars where everybody was signing people exclusive and this and that. And Joe Corallo, good friend of the show, him and Perch, Comics by Perch, had just recently done a retrospective on New X-Men as well. They didn't really like it.
No, they didn't.
No, but they had mentioned, you know, the animosity that Grant was having at DC. They had worked with Mark Waid on Superman Pitch, and it kind of got, you know, declined. And then, you know, Marvel came and swooped them up. But it seemed like they wanted Grant for name recognition, but they didn't necessarily want their ideas, right? So I was on board with this series from the beginning. So was Brooks. I remember we were Wednesday Warriors, right? I was working at the shop still, a different shop, but I was working at the shop, and this was the talk of the town. What is Grant Morrison going to do to New X-Men? And it was their run at Marvel was very short-lived, and I would have liked to have seen more work from Grant over there, but Marvel doesn't quite fit Grant's style. So the first thing I want to ask is, what are your overall impressions, and how did you come across this book in particular? Verno?
This is actually, I was just telling you beforehand, this is like the thing that got me into comic books, like in a big way. I was a pretty casual, you know, trade graphic novel reader kind of guy. And then my buddy handed me an omnibus of this run, and I loved the crap out of it. I was confused by a lot of it, just diving into it, you know, and actually this is my third time reading it. And this is by far the most that I've ever enjoyed it. My second read through, I felt a lot more like the fellows over on Perch's page. I was nitpicking things, and I was, the Zorn thing is stupid, and this and that. This run, or this read through, I loved it. I was like so captivated by the characterization, and I've come a long way, like in my comic book. I get things a lot more than I did even a couple years ago. So I love the crap out of it, man.
Heck yeah. What about you, Brian? And when was the first time were you collecting comics back in those days?
No, I dropped out during that time period, so I probably didn't read it till 2007, 2008. And yeah, I I got the Ultimate Edition trades, which I still have. I remember my first read through, loved it a lot. And second one, I was like you're saying, I was able to understand some more, and I was like kind of confused even more about some other things. But this read through, I listened to Perch's and Joe's show, and so I had a little bit, more that influenced my read some. But I still overall think it's a super fun read. There's a lot of there's a lot of artistic changes, and however, they're still all pretty good artists, and there's a lot of really, really cool stuff going on. So, I mean, I had a blast reading it again. So,
nice.
I mean,
yeah. I did too. I highly enjoyed rereading it again. And all of us here will definitely say it is worth it to check out the retrospective that they did on Comics by Perch. But this is going to be like the flip side of that. I guarantee you. Brooks, you were there with me every single month when this was dropping, through the delays, through the art changes at first. And those art changes, I think, iron out a little bit. We'll talk about that later. But tell us, what was it like back then and what was it like now, Brooks?
Well, I was an X-Men fan like back in the early 90s, from the animated series, but I'd fallen off comic books mostly during my high school years. But when I first met you, I was subscribed to 2 books. And it was just Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I was just picking up the manga for that. And like after I had, hung out with you for a while and I moved in with George, you're like, hey, he's like, you used to like X-Men, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you should now's the time to get back into X-Men. And like, so I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll get X-Men, I'll get Uncanny X-Men, get back into X-Men. And I'd never read or heard of Grant Morrison before. So this is my first experience of his writing, and like just how different New X-Men was to like the X-Men that I remembered. Like it was interesting. And Joe Casey was, I think, doing Uncanny at the time.
He was the Poptopia story, which kicked that into X Corp, right?
Yeah, and like I really liked the idea though of how he's kind of changing the X-Men from like just your typical superhero group to like he's having like Xavier's Institute be more like a school where there's students who are there to actually learn, and the X-Men are more like kind of like a rescue team sort of. Yeah. Like that's why they have the uniforms. They seem more like first responders or something like that. Like the X-Men are kind of like just it was a different take on X-Men. Like this is how we gain humanity's trust, is like we offer our aid to them when they need it. Yeah. Instead of your typical superhero thing. And I remember the first time I read through this, like I was confused in a lot of it, especially like the Weapon Plus stuff.
Yes, I was telling Verno about that.
On this reread, I was actually like, well, probably because I'm more familiar with Mr. Morrison's writing style now, but it was actually pretty straightforward to me. This read. It was.
I was telling Verno before we started, when it was just me and him backstage, and I was like, I remember being so fucking confused by the world and Phantom X, and there are still moments where I'm like, what are Phantom X's powers? You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that work? What's an external like nervous AI system. UFO nervous system? Like, I'm still like, but it's such a Morrison idea and concept that now being more veteran Morrison readers, we just roll with that shit. You know what I'm saying?
That's just that Morrison stuff.
It's just Morrison. But I really enjoyed rereading it this time. I love the book. I am on record many times saying that it's my favorite X-Men run. The movie had just come out, which makes the Xavier Institute feel more like a school for the first time. And that's something Grant wanted to bring into the book. And look at the enduring legacy of characters. And it could be argued that it's because the current writers grew up reading this stuff, right? Like, obviously that's true. Hickman's pulling a lot. I think Grant was a little bit ahead of his time with the audience's acceptance of some of his ideas, because Grant wanted to not just have like evil mutants versus good mutants, but Grant wanted to have like a mutant culture. Mutant music, mutant fashion designers, he wanted to Grant wanted to kind of explore what it was like to have this subculture rise to the top. And I think that's a much more accepted type of story today. So you out there in the chat, I want to know overall, what do you think about Grant Morrison's new X-Men? Now we're going to run through the story real quick. And let's just chunk this up in the first bits, right? With E is for Extinction. It kicks it off with this 3-issue arc. And I love the structure, what Morrison's doing. There are so many 3-issue arcs and single issue stories, and then like 5-issue stories for like big anchor moments like Riot at Xavier's, and of course Planet X, which is the penultimate, but actually kind of the big finale, right? So I like the short, sweet pacing and structure of the 3 comics for a story, especially to start off with. Frank Quitely on the artwork. This book blew me away. It introduces the idea of secondary mutations, which it seems like most people hated and they've kind of forgotten about, but they still have Emma's secondary mutation, even though Beast is more beasty now again. I remember even being a kid being like, Beast just looks like a furry blue Wolverine, right? Because of the hair, but they changed that here. So I like Lion Beast, you know, and I like the idea of the secondary mutations. It introduces Cassandra Nova, which is Xavier's twin that we never knew about, who is basically coming in to tear ass and spawn this genetic war. I really like this story. It introduces Emma into the idea. It destroys Genosha. I remember like the way Morrison wrote this script, like Genosha just dies like that on a page. On a page, they kill 16 million mutants, man. Like if they did that book today, there would be headlines about it. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a big shocking moment. I love this arc, and I think it's one of the tightest scripted arcs in the entire run. What do you think about E is for Extinction, Verno?
I love it, man. I think the idea of opening it up with the Neanderthals and seeing them have their extinction event, and then just the introduction of Cassandra Nova. I love her dialogue throughout the whole book. The dialogue is like my favorite aspect of it. This was my introduction to Frank Quitely's art, so it was jarring. That was one of the big things. Like when I first, like just the design of everybody, not having the costumes, seeing all that threw me off. But the first arc, the first like 12 issues, I think are masterful. They're like maybe one of the best X-Men runs like ever, right there. But yeah. I love the crap out of it, man. There's all sorts of good stuff.
I love it too. Great concepts introduced. Nano Sentinels, like that to me is like way scarier than just like regular ass Sentinels. And the ones that go out and they they go into like South Africa first and like strip it for material and they build these giant Sentinels. And I like how like they're like horrifying, like insect looking little things. I freaking love it. Jelani in the chat saying, of course he loves this. He probably should have been here tonight. Actually, Tin Man says Frank Quitely's best work was All-Star Superman. Great stuff. It is. And Frank was an artist. I was familiar with him because of Earth 2, which him and Grant had just done before the move over to DC. And I ate it up, but it is so weird at first. Right. You know, like I hadn't read Flexman, Tallow, or much of the Invisibles at this point. So it was jarring, but there was something about it that I got into. And there are so many people still that don't like Frank's style, but so many people that really get into it. What do you think about E is for Extinction as a launching point for Morrison's run? Brian?
Well, I did want to touch on, I think my first Frank Quitely was We 3, which might still be some of my favorite work of his.
That might be some of his best work, yeah.
Really revolutionary stuff with like that bullet kind of stuff and everything like that. I don't know. It was amazing stuff. But yeah, I mean, yeah, he's just one of the best in the game. And yeah, this, you couldn't ask for a stronger opening, you know, to a run. I mean, it just hits you and just keeps running, you know. I mean, and you're right. You know, the dialogue. One of the lines I had to write down is when Cassandra Nova was talking to I can't remember the Sentinel guy's name for some reason. Yeah, and said, "Forget dentistry. You were born for genocide." You know, it was just like I don't know. It's so cool, you know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was a huge start, and it did introduce a lot of things. But one is, I guess I was wondering if it ever got wrapped up in any other story, but you know that this was also the introduction of the E gene, right? You know, it's called E for Extinction because another big part of the start is that humanity is going to die out in 4 or 5 generations, right? And so that kind of makes it hard to integrate with humans when you know you're eventually destined to come over, and you kind of think it's going to get solved at the end, but then you realize Beast's lying, was lying about being able to fix the E gene, So I mean, you guys probably read way more X-Men than me. I don't know if they ever did anything.
Brooks has consistently read it since. So Brooks, have they ever? Because they even kind of dropped that shit for the most part in watching the Perch and Joe commentary, and I can't remember the other dude's name, but they were like talking about all these things that never got explained, like the Nano Sentinels. I was like, no, they got explained. Like,
Morrison stuff got pretty much dropped after he left the book.
All of it did, but like, did the E gene?
It took a while. Like a lot of the characters he introduced in his arc disappeared for like a good while, like a year or so, before like they started to trickle back in really to the X-Men universe.
Yeah, they brought in the Cuckoos, and then Remender brought in Phantom X into Uncanny X-Force.
The world was a big central part of that Uncanny X-Force.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know about the E gene, but I really feel like that's the one thing that like one of the things they said in that was that it feels like Genosha gets destroyed and they never really deal with that. I'm like, that permeates every single story arc for me in this book. Like it's mentioned all the time. But the one thing is the E gene, it comes and then it goes. I guess like the whole Scarlet Witch thing kind of wiped that all out because that happened right after this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, did it? Okay.
So, yeah, pretty much. They just kind of gutted the X-Men franchise for a while.
The thing about the 2000s is like, especially in the X books, is that they were trying to whittle down a lot of characters and by having like deaths and or having M-Day and stuff like that. They're basically trying to get rid of a lot of these characters, and then Jonathan Hickman comes along and basically is like, they're all back.
Right.
They're fucking all back, right? I love it. I don't even know how. I remember seeing Quentin show back up in Wolverine and the X-Men by Jason Aaron, and I don't even remember the explanation on how he came back.
He appeared in I think it was it the Avengers versus X-Men? Because I remember he appeared as like a terrorist, and Captain America brought him in.
Yeah, because he was in the
contention between him and Wolverine as to what to do with him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. All right. So let's see. Go Flow Wolfhog, I think, is Wolfhog. I got back into reading comics because of the X-Men movie. I kept reading because of Grant Morrison. I love the whole run, especially the first 3 and 4 last 4 issues. And the Zorn reveal blew my mind. It did too. Me too. We'll get to that. What do you think about that first arc, Brooks? E is for Extinction.
I mean, it was a good arc to get started on. It kind of goes right. It just sets the tone, And he's working like Grant Morrison is working with a very like a very kind of shallow pool of X-Men. Like he basically is like he takes a very he doesn't go outside of that team as much. He doesn't like have many other X-Men come in. It's mostly Cyclops, Wolverine, Jean, Emma Frost, Beast, Xavier. But I guess he does focus a lot more on the the student mutants. He's got all these student mutants he's introducing too, and it was an interesting story, and I like the introduction of Cassandra Nova. Seemed like a very Grant Morrison thing. It's a very kind of Grant Morrison villain.
Yeah,
like having this like kind of weird, fucked up backstory of being murdered in the womb, and kind of throwing a little shade on Xavier, because Xavier's always been put in this kind of light that he's like, so pure and good.
Whatever. But they like all the times, like every writer's like, but what if Xavier's got a dark secret?
Yeah, that's kind of what led to Onslaught too.
Yeah, it is, exactly. I was like, they literally just did that.
And like Cassandra is just like, it's hard to tell, like, she actually she believes what she's saying, or she's just, she just wants to watch the world burn, she just doesn't care, It's hard to tell. She doesn't seem to, she takes this kind of weird joy out of causing pain and death. But at the same time, like, when you learn her origin story, you kind of feel like, you would be kind of fucked up if you'd gone through that kind of
Yes.
situation.
Like you get strangled by your umbilical cord
And like
in
he
the
has
womb.
to like she's basically like a bunch of cells who like eventually manage to pull herself together.
Yeah, something like that. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't like. I still don't quite get that, but I don't care. It works.
Doesn't sound like it'd be too fun.
It works for me, you know. So yeah, I like that. It's a very Morrison came in, wanted to change up the costumes, wanted to make it look more like the movie, wanted to make it more romantic, wanted to make it more sexy, wanted to strip down the mutants that they used. And I like that approach. I like focusing on just a small core group, expanding it out to a school, adding in these new concepts, these new ideas that honestly were very alienating to longtime X-Men fans, like people that love shit, like people that were like Fatal Attractions is the best X-Men story of all time. You're wrong, but it's fun, it's great, right. But like that was I can't imagine Grant being a hard pill to swallow, you know. So yeah, right after that, they introduced the character of Zorn, and Zorn is a controversial figure because I think Zorn is the best character in this run. And then, of course, it turns out to be Magneto, right, which kind of ruins the idea of what a great, amazing, so quintessentially Grant Morrison character to permanently be in the X-Men, right? Like, we'll talk about the Zorn reveal later on, but the introduction of Zorn was in that annual, very annoyingly, was done by Lionel Francis Yu and the panoramic shit. Like
even more annoying in omnibus form.
Oh my God. I read it in these hardcovers. There's 3 of these. They're like the ultimate editions, but they're just the hardcover ones. They're a little bit oversized. If you put the 3 of them together, it's basically the omnibus. You know what I'm saying? But like it was hard as fuck to read that in that. I can't even imagine, Verno, what it was like to read that.
Ridiculous.
With the omnibus. So tell me, what did you think of the issue and how was your experience? Because I guess they weren't thinking back then, like, how is this going to read 20 years later collected in a hardcover omnibus?
There's been, God, I think there was another one. I want to say, never mind. I was going to say that his Justice League run might have had a few issues like that, but I might be wrong. It's annoying as hell. And I switch back and forth between digital because I do a lot of reading at work as well. So I'm going back and forth between the omnibus and that. As far as the issue goes, that is like my biggest, like the thing that I kind of can't get over about the run is the Zorn stuff. I love the character. I enjoy him throughout the course of the entire series, but the reveal is silly to me. And I will point out, because you have those deluxe editions or whatever they are, they put Magneto on the cover of volume 3, which is really annoying. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know that when I had first read it, and my buddy let me borrow actually the omnibus and those, or before I had the
Magneto's
omnibus.
alive?
Right. Right.
With Zorn's helmet?
Oh, yeah. It's like right there.
So I've never understood that. Is that what it's supposed to be? Is that the whole thing is set up by Magneto? They're all actors. That's what's going on.
It's so
weird to me.
That's the toughest thing to swallow. Now, here's my question. Is Magneto doing a fake Chinese accent the whole time that he's Zorn? Because if so, that's fucking hilarious.
It's probably, and
cancel Magneto,
right?
Appropriating. No, I mean that's the one thing. Like I remember when I first read it, the big reveal at the end, and I remember being like, oh, wow, when did he kill Zorn and take over? And then no, I built that prison. It was like, what? That really doesn't make sense. Like that's a really elaborate ass plan. And Magneto has done some elaborate ass plans, but this is really fucking elaborate. and
so
basically,
convoluted.
And Joe and them had pointed out that like, so Magneto's cool with them like killing these mutants. Like, I don't know. It's so weird. Well, what do you think about it, Brian?
Well, I love the issue. I do like Lionel's art, and I think it's it's a great introduction for him.
And it starts the Scott Emma telepathic infidelity situation.
Yeah, and it kind of starts the human part too, right? I mean, because it kind of leads into that. Yeah. But to me, it's such a convoluted plan that it's just somewhat nonsensical. Like it makes more sense that he would have killed Zorn and took over for him later. That makes way more sense, because there's an issue we may talk about later. It wasn't in the rundown, but it's one of my favorite issues in the run. Is that John Paul Leon and Bill Sienkiewicz art, one where of Living and Dying. So like Magneto goes to where he's from, apparently, finds people that knew his family and knew him as a kid, and has conversations with them. And like, how is that? How does that work? You know, I mean, and,
I also don't like the idea that some of these issues are narrated by Zorn as Zorn. Like, is he keeping a journal as Zorn? Like,
do you think that Morrison had planned that from the get-go? I've always kind of felt he didn't.
He said, I remember him saying, I remember Morrison being quoted as saying that they wanted to eventually build this into the greatest Magneto story you've ever read. He said the whole thing is the best. This was very early. Like, I remember at RCC, Brooks, hearing this from Chris Lamb, our buddy, who was like, oh, Morrison says that it's going to be the biggest. And then they killed Magneto in the first issue. And I was like, wow, I'm confused.
But it's in the manifesto.
He pulled a Phantom X on you.
Yeah, right? A misdirection.
Yeah.
Brian says it's in the manifesto.
Yeah, because it's he planned it all along. And now in the manifesto, it doesn't say Zorn. It says early we're going to create a one-shot issue that, you know, brings in a character that's eventually going to be Magneto. So that threw me off even more.
Wow, yeah.
So
and the power thing with Zorn, I get it, because there's even a moment after the reveal. We're talking about the reveal way quicker than I thought we were, but I mean, this is a natural, organic process here at Comics Revisited. But I remember Magneto says, like, you know, I got a star for a brain. I thought it was an iron prison. I thought it was too obvious. And I'm like, no, it's actually kind of not. But you really think about it, the power sets kind of work for the most part. Because I remember being like, oh, he can make Xavier walk because of the Sentinels, the Nano Sentinels. Oh, he cured everybody of the virus because they were Nano Sentinels. Like, oh, he can do all this stuff with his powers. And Morrison's taking a very literal idea about the power of magnetism, electromagnetism, how that, like a magnetic field, a sun. So, but there's some weird stretches in there. The biggest of which is that Zorn's mind is read by multiple telepaths in this run, and they don't get everything, but they get something. And typically he knows how to fashion a helmet that would block. It would be better if they were like, I can't read his mind. Right. But like all they can see, they're like I think Xavier says at one point, all I can see is a bright, shiny star. Like, how did he accomplish that? I don't know.
Right.
So his number one henchman backing him up was apparently code. Whatever. Okay, me? Was that talking?
I think I lost you there for a minute.
Okay, was I on? All right, Brian, continue.
You sound like if a Nintendo had a voice, how that would sound.
Brian, continue.
Oh, kind of like on a Star Fox.
Yeah. I don't know. I did write down another quote from that one where they were, I think it was John Sublime trying to buy the mutant. And he said, why do you want to be like us? Mutant lives are short and fearful, or worse, long and fearful. And I thought that was like, pretty cool, because it speaks to that culture he was setting up where, people that aren't mutants want to be mutants, and then, they adopt mutant fashion, and it's analog for, how we behave in general. Here, I thought that was
kind of like
cool.
the natural progression of the mutant hate group idea. It's like they don't just want to kill mutants anymore. Now they want to harvest them.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, that's which I thought was a really cool element to bring in to the, as the villains, not just, like Robbie was saying, not just, good mutants versus bad mutants. It was like, ratcheting up the, the human element for that. Cause you had people that just wanted to get rid of them. Then it got even worse. Right. I don't know. Yeah. I thought that was a great concept to introduce. So.
I hope you guys hear me, but do you have any thoughts on the Zorn introduction issue?
Yeah, Brooks, do you have any thoughts on the Zorn introduction? I believe is what he said.
Okay.
Yeah. I just heard Zorn.
Zorn was an interesting character. Like, I liked that he was put in charge of this class of basically. They were kind of like the special class of students. And, the way these kids are and how he reacts to them, I thought was always pretty funny. Like, especially like, they pinned the kick me sign to his back.
He is hella patient with these
clowning
kids.
on him and like joking, especially like Basilisk. Basilisk is just this big dumb idiot who does nothing but make fart jokes.
Right.
Yep.
And
the amount
and like the reveal that it is Magneto, like there's no way Magneto would have put up with any of that bullshit. Not for a second.
That's one of the things that kind of throws me off about the whole Zorn thing. If you believe that that was his plan, he set it all up. He's been planning this forever, right? And then once it's revealed that Zorn is Magneto, Magneto seems crazy, right? It's because he's huffing on the kick and everything. But those two things don't jive. Just how like unstable he seems after he takes the helmet off. And all the kids, I love how they're like, "Will you go back to being Zorn? He was so nice."
Yeah, that Ernst with holding No Girl. Yeah, just keeps thinking Zorn's coming back no matter what. Yeah.
By the way, this is like a dream come true. I'm sitting in the captain's chair. Station people are going to turn this on and be like, "What the fuck happened to Rob?"
Robbie who?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I know it's skipping ahead, but in that part, like I guess there was part of me that was thinking on this read through that he integrated that Zorn personality. Like, if this is how it was, he integrated it so powerfully. There was a 2 or 3 page part where he was pausing and like, you know, it had
he's like
word balloons with no.
He's not convinced that Zorn actually didn't exist all of a sudden.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys, I'm trying to think. Magneto didn't die at the end of this, right? No? Right?
Yeah, he did.
He did?
Well, it shows Wolverine.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to
Wolverine
ask.
killed him
like that.
Brooks, I didn't read a lot of stuff between there and now. I've read a good chunk, but I've missed a lot. When did he come back? Like, how long was he gone afterwards? And was he? I know he did the whole Utopia thing. Was he straight to a villain, or what happened there? Do you know?
Yeah, I cannot remember when Magneto came back after this one. I don't think it was even in an X book. It may have been like a crossover event or something. But they resolved the whole Zorn thing like later on by somehow like the Collective, which was like this basically like a collection of all the mutant powers that were lost during M Day or something. Like, I don't know. It was a confusing kind of.
Did he come back?
They basically just hand waved it and like kind of put out this bullshit story to kind of cover for it.
Well, that's what's one thing interesting to me is like just really getting into it the last few years. It seems like a lot of people really respect this run, but I hear a lot of people don't at the same time. At the time when it was coming out, I know you were into it and Robbie was into it, but what about like the interwebs? Were people in general, were they feeling this run, or do you remember the temperature at the time?
We weren't as online back then as we are now.
We didn't have everybody else's thoughts in our head all the time too.
Yeah, we still use like magazines and stuff to gauge the public census on things like that. So like as around the shop where, I remember being around the shop, most people were into it. People liked it well enough.
Right.
Like I don't remember any detractors of it back then, but I was living in kind of a bubble too. Like it's like me and Robbie and our friends, and we all tended to like the same things most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Come back to us, Rob. What the hell?
Yeah. He said he's rebooting.
All right.
But I was going to say, I don't know when Magneto came back, but I do remember that the way, because I think Astonishing X-Men came out shortly after this.
Right.
Yeah. Astonishing X-Men is when they basically flip back to the traditional superhero outfits too.
Yeah. But I remember him, I think the way he proved himself was by bringing Kitty back.
Yeah.
Because remember, she was phased into that bullet rocket thing.
She joined Excalibur. She was in Excalibur last I remembered. And like from then, I don't know, like I lost track of her after like 95, I think.
They couldn't feel. They couldn't feel more different. Morrison's run to Whedon's run. But I really enjoyed that run.
It was kind of like flipping the switch off of the Morrison run in a way. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he did bring back Cassandra Nova, which was probably one of the first characters from this run that was actually brought back into the X-Men verse.
Right. That's kind of like why I bring up the question, like how it was received at the time, because for Whedon to take the route that he did, it seems like at least Whedon didn't like the Morrison run, or maybe Marvel, maybe sales weren't great. That's what I've always been curious about. that they got rid of that idea so quickly and kind of went back to the more closer to the old status quo, I would say, right?
Well, that's always the way it is with comics. Like anytime you have like a storyteller does a radical story, no matter how good it is, like it's got to reset. It's got to snap back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because that's just how the fans like it.
Yeah. Well, Morrison's probably the only one that can write Morrison and keep it going, right? I mean,
yeah.
But I remember that happened on the Batman too. After he went off Batman, Scott Snyder took over for that, and a very different feel.
Yeah.
It was a good run though. But
yeah, Snyder.
Can y'all see me?
Like,
We cannot see you, Rockin Robbie.
Are you for
kind
real?
of hear you.
I'm having some internet issues, so I'm just going to try to work with this. So you guys continue on, please. Brian, take the reign.
Me?
He said you, buddy.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. Well, the next storyline is the germ-free generation, which is full bore into the U-Men, and John Sublime, and this is where Igor Kordy kind of comes in to art because Frank is amazing artist, a little slow sometimes on monthly books, so they were having to fill in, and it also did kind of keep advancing the Cassandra Nova storyline too, because the first arc you kind of think it's that's it, but no, she's like continually wreaking havoc, and I think this is where she using Charles Xavier's body says I'm a mutant, and that causes yet a whole new suite of problems.
Right.
And then I think releases the E-Gene report, and everything. So things aren't looking good, because you got these U-Men trying to harvest mutants. And is this the one where they capture
Angel?
Yes.
Yeah, Angel. Yeah, she made her first appearance was in this one.
Right.
Yeah.
I love Angel so much. She's just so raw. There's a lot of characters throughout this run that are just more like someone like I know chicks like Angel. You know what I mean? Just like little hardcore, little ruffians that up to no good. I always love how she's influencing Beak. Beak's straight edge hardcore, but she's like, come on, let's have sex and get drunk. He's like, oh my God. I love that.
Yeah, their interactions are amazing. So, Verno, do you have more thoughts on the?
Yeah, sure. Another part of this, I think it's in this arc, is the mutant flu. Like it's been going on for a while, but I like how it just keeps getting worse and worse, and like just Jean's like feeling like shit. It adds a layer of drama, like to the whole situation. I'm not sure if this is the one. It might not be, but one of my favorite parts is when Wolverine finally brings Angel back to the school, and like Jean's trying to say like, or Angel saying something like, who are all these freaks looking around at all these freaky looking mutants? And I think Jean's like, oh no, they're not freaks. We're all normal. And then Beast busts out. He's got this naked Xavier in his arms, all dripping wet. And he's like, someone help get this woman out of Professor Xavier's head. It's like, that was one of the most like perfect, like comedic timing, end of an issue. One of my favorite moments in the whole run, honestly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That was great.
Great.
Brooks.
I remember this story arc in particular mostly because it has one of my favorite Jean Grey moments in it, which is where the humans show up at Xavier's and like they know everybody's sick from this from the nano sentinel flu and all that. So Jean's like walks out. She's like, "You guys need to go away." And they're like, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Like you're half dead and all this other shit." And and she because they the human, they believe that they can't step out out of their little special suits until they've been like pure. They have their mutant body parts and everything. So like they're in these stupid fucking spacesuit type deals. And so Jean's just like, she basically makes them like puke in their suits and then shit themselves in their suits.
So hardcore.
And she just fucking walks off like it ain't no thing. Yeah, and like Sublime is like he's an interesting kind of idea. Is like this guy. He's just like he's kind of embraced by the mainstream. He's got this book, like the idea of this this kind of humanity that's made by grafting mutant parts onto themselves. And like the way he sells is like, oh, we just want to be like you. It's like it can't be offensive to you because when we murder you, because we want to be you. And I love, like, I'm not a big fan of Emma Frost, to be honest, but I mean, she did have a good scene in this story too, where she punches Sublime out the window.
Right.
I
love that his
she's in diamond form and like her nose is bleeding. She's like, you broke my nose. Because she's like, she'd had like expensive nose job and he'd ruined it.
Yeah. I love that we actually see her original nose.
Second story, I think.
Right. Yeah. When Jean gets into her mind and starts tearing ass.
I think Morrison might be like, and I think I really just realized this on this read through. I think he might be like the funniest writer writing comics. Like, he is hilarious throughout. And Emma Frost, a lot of her dialogue is maybe the best. I think she's got the funniest dialogue throughout the whole. And it's better early on. He kind of goes away from it later as the affair kicks in, and he kind of starts to look at her in a bit of a different light. But early going, she's my favorite character in it.
Yeah, she's powerhouse in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like, I want to say they said it in the manifesto too, but there's kind of a televangelist type style to Sublime, and kind of a hyper religious thing, and they said they were trying to go for originally it was called Black Cross, and going to be more like a Ku Klux Klan thing, but I think he veered towards more like a Scientology vibe, and that like when I read that I was like, oh yeah, that makes a shit ton of sense, because they're always trying to level up, and things like that. I thought that was pretty cool, to introduce that there. So
now I know we're probably supposed to get into this later, but I literally just realized on this read through, like, the Sublime, like, I didn't understand any of that shit that you learn in Here Comes Tomorrow at the end. So this character, John Sublime, was he fucking snorting kick or something? Like, how does he tie in with this ancient, whatever the fuck this Sublime thing is that we learn about later on? Do you know, either of you? Or no, it's just
I wish I could say I did.
Right. Me neither.
Yeah. I guess I just thought it was like that entity or whatever that was Sublime took him over. Like maybe he was a normal dude.
Like, it was like in the drug or something. I don't.
But we never saw him doing the drugs. I don't think. Maybe we did.
Like, the idea of Sublime is kind of, I never really did figure all that out.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
I don't think Morrison did either, but that's fine.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is you can, like, did you guys both listen to that Perch conversation they had? Like, you can do that. Like, we can sit here for 2 hours and pick all of it apart. But each comic is so damn enjoyable. Like, each panel is so enjoyable. Like, you just got to let all that stuff go for this run. That's the way I look at it, really. This is not one to nitpick, because you definitely can nitpick it.
Yeah, you can nitpick it and you get stuck on some things, but yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, every time I've read it, I've had fun reading it. And the things that would be, able to nitpick, or I don't know, there's easy to overcome because there's so much other goodness to it. I mean, there's just so many different storylines going on, and yeah, they did, contract the cast and everything like that, but lots of threads kept kind of going through, and there's a couple of one and dones, but I mean, I don't know, I thought it was wrapped up pretty well, but I know we're skipping way ahead there, but so speaking of that, I know the next section is Imperial, but I did want to touch for a second on the issue between Imperial and Germ-Free Generation, because when I was reading it, I can't remember what it's Silent. It's called Silence Psychic. Psychic Rescue in Progress, and I was 3 pages into that, and I was like, Jonathan Hickman. We're talking about how much he pulls from it. One of his giant size run issues was almost the carbon copy of that story, and that one's one of my favorite issues of the whole run, and a lot of that is Frank Quitely's art in that one where Jean and Emma are going in to rescue Charles and everything like that. I don't know, I guess I wanted to take a quick detour and get your guys' thoughts on that issue, Vern.
That might be my favorite issue. It's one of my favorite comic books, period. Like it's absolutely incredible. And you're right. I love the nod to it that Hickman did recently. I think it was his giant size Storm.
Giant size X-Men, Jean Grey, and
Jean Grey.
Frost.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
The artwork is beautiful. I don't know if you guys are fans of digital, but like I've read that issue a handful of times. And this recent read through, I read that one digital. I did the panel by panel and just was sitting here at my house in dead silence, just switching panel to panel. And like it blew me away. Like it hit me harder than that issue's ever hit me. I think there's a lot of symbolism in it that I don't get. If I'm being honest, I would love if Robbie was here because maybe he could lay some of that on me. But there's bits and pieces that I don't get. Like a lot of it actually. Like Emma, she goes in there and she just changes her mind right away. She's like, "No, fuck this. I'm not gonna help. I want to leave." And she's just trying to exit the whole time. But I loved it. I loved it, man.
Yeah. Brooks?
You're talking about the Nuff Said issue, I'm guessing.
The silent one.
Yeah, that's
what it's called.
From a Nuff Said month back in the day. But yeah, that's a good issue. I remember liking that issue a lot because it was letting the artist tell the story, and like the idea that they're going into his mind to discover the truth. Kind of like made for some interesting imagery that without the word bubbles, you could take that imagery in and like use it to, interpret the story rather than, just basically being told, what's going on. So yeah, I think it was a really good, interesting story. And the reveal was like a big shock back in the day. Right. I remember.
Yeah. Right.
Because it was basically like he's revealing like what happened at the end of E is for Extinction, and that the X-Men have been set up, and they just this is not long after Xavier had or Cassandra Nova as Xavier had gone into space in the Shi'ar Empire, and like that was it kind of added a new element to that scene when you reread it.
Right.
Like, oh shit.
Yeah. I love Emma drinking out of her little flask. I absolutely love it.
Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you. You're a little bit off, but better.
Okay, I'm having internet issues. Apparently, Mike is having some issues too at his place, so I'm just gonna try to hang as long as maybe. What's up? What are we talking about?
Shit, you sound crazy now, bro.
Okay, yeah. Just keep going.
All right,
keep going.
Okay, but I do love me some silent issues, so I didn't want to skip past that one. But so the next story arc is Imperial, and we get Frank quietly back. Obviously he did that silent issue, but he does a couple of these issues. And I thought it was really cool seeing his take on all the Shi'ar characters. I thought he really made, a lot of those just like look super slick. And is this where the Jean Grey's Phoenix kind of thing reemerges? Because
it'd been hinted at like earlier on. Like I think after the whole human thing, he had some flames coming off of her. Like,
yeah. Okay.
Like there've been instances where she'd kind of been displaying like Phoenix level abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like when it first started becoming more apparent was during this one. This is the one where she basically has to pull Xavier's mind together from like
she has to pull it out of that body.
She breaks his mind up, puts it into like a bunch of different people's minds, and then like has to reassemble it. It's like something super ridiculous thing that only Grant Morrison would even think to have a character try to do.
I think she stores it. First of all, she's walking around with it for a while, like in her.
Yeah, because like it's taking a toll on her. She get the nosebleed and everything.
Mm-hmm. Then she puts it in, I think, every mutant on the planet.
Yeah,
she uses
Cerebro. Yeah, that's right. She's Cerebro to do it, or to help her do it.
Yeah, and it's such a crazy culmination because that you were mentioning earlier where everybody's getting sick, right? And so there's this, and they're too busy fighting off the human and all these other things to really sit down and try to figure out why everybody's getting sick. Then you start realizing, they start realizing why they're getting sick. And then, they've got Cassandra Nova deliberately poisoned the body. So that's why she was having to pull the consciousness out. It's just like, I mean,
it has like Alzheimer's and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love
just
how
like hit after hit.
It also, like, you learn as it progresses that Cassandra Nova, she's behind everything. Like, even the protesters outside, it's because she went in Xavier's body and he announced to the world he was a mutant. So, like, all these things that are just adding, like, even the protesters and the flu, they just add like more like stress to the whole situation. It's brilliant. It really, really is. The first 12 issues, I think, are like the best. Do you guys think that's the best part of the run for you, or no?
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say because, I don't know. There's, I like some of the one-shot issues too. I don't know. I'm a big Kid Omega and Phantom X fan.
Right. I agree.
I love that stuff.
Those are two great sections.
So,
Brooks? Yeah, I think I probably like Riot Xavier's a little more. Riot Xavier is probably my favorite story out of the run.
That's great.
It's like they're all good though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then and this one kind of ends with I thought the resolution to the trick to how they caught her and everything like that, I thought was pretty clever. Using the drone and the things like that, and then the kind of final scene was like, superheroes don't they don't kill, right? Because this type of creature you would think would be. You wouldn't have too much compunction killing this
right
creature that costs.
Yeah, well, I think like Xavier's like guilt about what he did kind of like determined that like he took away Cassandra Nova's right to existence, so now he feels like he needs to like give that back to her, and like do like making her, having her become Ernst is kind of his way of like giving her the second chance they took away from her, in the womb.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
See, maybe I missed that. Like, explain that to me. She becomes Ernst. Maybe I missed this. Like,
well, that's apparently like they somehow, I guess, maybe created the Ernst body for her, maybe.
Okay,
maybe
I missed that.
Like the cells of her old body, which, like, all I remember is that Ernst is Cassandra Nova.
Okay.
I think that like. Because they changed that later on too. Because I remember when she appeared in the Whedon in Astonishing X-Men, she was like back to being, full grown. But the character of Ernst was supposed to be like Cassandra Nova being rehabilitated and being like educated.
No shit.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah,
the last story, in the future, Cassandra Nova is there. And then she's talking to Martha, and she's like, always did prefer the name Ernst because it was like her favorite artist.
Okay. No kidding. Okay, yeah, I definitely missed that. I picked up a lot of things on this third read through that I missed the first two times, like for sure. So it's a dense read. There's no doubt. But the other thing I wanted to mention about this arc is we have Scott and Zorn. They end up in Shi'ar space. I believe that's part of this arc. And the Igor Cordy art there, we won't touch on that. But are they captured off panel? Are they captured in a different comic book that Morrison didn't write, or did I miss it? Do you guys ever wonder about that?
Yeah, I think that may have been in an annual issue, maybe.
Okay, because it's maybe not part of the
it may not have just. It may have just been like you didn't, they just happened to be there.
Skipped over that detail.
Yeah. That always threw me off. I was like, I'm missing something here. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah. I'll say I can't recall how they got there. So
I think it was an annual.
Okay. Okay. So all right. Well, yeah. Okay. So the next section got in there is New Worlds, and unless we want to take a quick detour and talk about that of Living and Dying, because that's kind of the New World story is kind of bookended by two issues done by John Paul Leon and Bill Sienkiewicz. I mean, two absolute legends. I thought both of those issues were pretty dope. But that Verno, you got any thoughts on that of Living and Dying issue? Or
I'm trying to think of which one is in Living and Dying, my friend. To be honest with you,
it's the one where Zorn goes back to, it's like the Uyghur region, and they have that kind of.
There's this mutant that he's basically like he's dying. He's like he's too big for his body or something. He's all messed up. Yeah, well, I honestly, it bugged me a little bit because I spent half the time thinking like, all right, Magneto, this is Magneto, you know what I mean? And then he's like talking about his uncle, who's a Chinese man. I'm like, is he just bullshitting this guy? That throws me off. The concepts and the ideas of Zorn going there to help this mutant in need, that's cool, and I liked it. And the art is great, I agree. But it bugs me. That one does get in my head a little bit. A lot of the Zorn parts do, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I hear you. Brooks?
Okay, so I'm trying to recall. So this issue is Zorn goes.
He goes, there's like this big freakish looking mutant, and it's like his mutant powers had just kicked on. And if they had let him just like live and be, he would have fully mutated. He would have been fine.
Yeah, I remember now.
See, it's where that's where he starts rampaging through the town.
Don't the cops kill him or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because he ends up getting gunned down by cops because didn't like his mother or somebody was sick, and he was trying to get medicine for him, but as he was getting the medicine, like his mutation just went out of control. So he's still trying to get the medicine to her, but like at the same time he has to deal with this mutation that's happening to him at the same time. Yeah, I think that was kind of like him exploring kind of the more tragic aspect of.
What's up? I'm on my phone.
You look great.
Well, thank you.
There you go.
What are we doing? I'm having the internet. I called them and they were like, reset the router. I'm like, I already did that, and they're like, whatever. So anyway, here we are.
You look better at this angle than any other angle I've ever seen you at.
Looks like you're looming over us. I don't like it.
Yeah, I feel judged a little bit.
I feel like one of the scrubs in the PCP Excitable crew.
I hear you.
Well, we are. Where are we at? Where we leave off there, Brianiac?
We are. We're about to get into the New World section because you gave this rundown, and then I felt like taking some detours on the one shots. So we're the New World section.
Nice.
We hadn't started it yet.
Well, New Worlds is all the one shots and stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's where. Yeah. You got the. There's two done by John Paul Leon and Bill Sienkiewicz that kind of bookend it, and then. But yeah, they're not numbered issues, but it's kind of the introduction of Thematic between that and the World. Mm-hmm. So I mean, because like the first issue of it introduces Thematic, and then it kind of wraps up with was it Weapon 12?
Right, we've
released in the train
intro and the train derailing.
Yeah,
nice. Sounds cool.
It was, Robbie. It was deep.
So we're on New Worlds. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
All right. Am I good? Am I not choppy or anything right now?
Yeah, coming through clear, man.
Okay, cool. So New Worlds, I really like the John Paul Leon stuff. One of my singular favorite issues in this entire run may be the one where Zorn goes to find that mutant who everybody thinks is a monster, and they're talking about monsters and this and that. And it's like, that could have been some really great, introspection on Magneto's character, but then with the reveal later on, I don't know, it's so weird, but that's one of my favorite issues, and all the Thematic stuff. I know Igor Cordley gets a lot of flack for his work on this run, but I think he's an amazingly talented artist. But I just feel like he came in to step in because Quitely was late and Ethan Van Sciver was late. And who are the editors at Marvel who are thinking that Frank Quitely is going to do this book monthly? You know what I'm saying? Did they not know anything? Somebody at DC, I bet editors at DC were like, we'll see how this works out.
Right.
But I liked it overall. What do you think about it, Verno?
That issue?
Those issues.
Those
Yeah,
issues.
we just finished talking about that one.
We talked a little bit
back
about
in.
that one.
All right. Then it's
as far
Riot at Xavier's is next, right?
Well, we didn't really get into the Phantom X stuff. We just touched on that one shot that you were just talking about. But as far as the intro to Phantom X, aside from the art, because I think he's a great storyteller, and I think his first issue that he did, Igor Kordy, I think that one was really good. You could tell he didn't rush that one as much. The intro, or Angel's second issue, the one where they're sitting there at the diner with Wolverine.
Yeah,
his art is great on that. You can really tell that it's way more rushed for pretty much every issue that he does after that. But I love Phantom X, man. I love his mom. I love his house. I love his backstory, his attitude, his fake French accent. I love everything about the guy. But I also another great aspect of this is when Xavier is sitting down with Jean, and he's like kind of like testing the Phoenix powers, and you've got her like floating these spoons, and then he touches the spoon and she can feel it. I love it.
That's great stuff. I remember the idea, because a lot of people they equate Jean Grey with the Phoenix, but that was not actually the story because it got retconned. It was just like a clone body or some shit like that, right? So Jean actually never had the Phoenix manifestation happen to her, and it was something that Steven Seagal was teasing in the run that led up into some randomness and then into the Morrison run. So that blew our minds back in the day. I loved the idea that she was actually manifesting these powers, the idea that she could feel, and just what she was doing. We're like, this is the most complex type shit. Like, it's just silverware, right? But that's a lot of moving parts that she's doing all at the same time, effortlessly. You know what I'm saying? So I love that stuff. And Igor allegedly was doing some of these, some of the run. He was doing them within a week. Like he would render the entire 22-page comic in a week because they got far behind. Right. And you can tell in the hardcovers I have, they even show like, oh, here's the scene drawn by Ethan Van Sciver, but it was actually Igor Kordy in the book. And it's because EVS was late. You know what I'm saying? So I know he's attached to this run, EVS, but I think he's a very insignificant part. Igor is a more significant part. And like you said, Verno, he is a master storyteller, right? But the rendering, he didn't have time. He was doing Soldier X at the same time, which if you look at Soldier X, completely different world. That was the book he was putting his energy into. But I do feel like they kind of iron it out. So now I'm lost again. Are we still talking about New Worlds, or should we move on to Riot at Xavier's? What's going on?
I mean,
I've been talking about for the last 3 minutes.
The saddle.
All right, Brian, continue on with what we were just talking about.
Yeah. I also like that. It brought in the Weapon Plus stuff. So kind of teases more of the stuff for Wolverine. And everything. But it's like he's got those plates. For his telepathic shields. And I don't remember if it was in that story. I think it was in one of the issues there where she starts figuring out that some of this misdirection, and he just goes, "Oh, are some of my thoughts leaking?" I just thought that was really cool. Like
that's a nice bit.
And I just love the costume design and everything like that, and just like the concept of more and more things being bred, and designed to be super soldiers and everything. And I don't know. I just love that whole concept of that character. And yeah, the external nervous system makes no sense to me, but I love it. I think it's so cool, and then later people take it, he's like falling in love with it. It's just like, there's so many things you can do with that.
Well, Morrison's got to throw in the flying saucers, and they had just introduced not too long before this run started a character named Maggot, which I love, who has an external digestive system. So if I believe in that, right, why not, right? So Phantom X is a character that I really came to fully appreciate with Rick Remender's work on Uncanny X-Force. That will be something one day we will cover here on Comics Revisited. I guarantee it. Brooks, what do you think about what we were just talking about? Phantom X.
Well, yeah, I like Phantom X, and I like his initial story involves Jean and Xavier mostly. So it's kind of like he's kind of teaming up with Jean throughout most of the story, and
I thought they were going to
he's kind
start
of flirting with her too, because like
I thought they were going to get down, bro.
it's like because at the time her and Scott's relationship was like shaky on both sides, and so I think he's kind of like he kind of knows that somehow, and he's like exploiting it, or he may just that's just how he is. He just flirts with everybody. And like even at the end, like he's like, I know you're going to let me go because of the way your pelvis is tilted or some shit like that.
Yeah. The one annoying thing I remember about Phantom X, and I love Phantom X in the Remender X-Force world, but every time it was convenient, they were like, misdirection. It was a misdirection the entire time. He made you think that or something. So anyway. So real quick, I love germ-free generation as well. It's an interesting concept, mutant appropriation that's going on there. Imperial blew my mind. The moment when, is it Smasher or Super Guardian, whoever that comes down and he's like tells the cows this urgent message, like that's a great bit. The way it wraps up, I think it's great. The reveal, there's so many reveals that took us by surprise in this, and maybe they come off different and wonky now, but Cassandra Nova being in Xavier was one of those what the fuck moments when we read this, back in the day. So now let's talk about what I think is probably one of the highest points of this entire run. Riot at Xavier's, introducing the character of Quentin Quire, this is the most student-centric story in the entire run, right? And I adore it for that. And I also just adore it because it's really, I don't mean to keep going back to the Perch and Joe show, right? But like they were talking about how like this didn't feel like it had led into itself. And Morrison's not that kind of writer. There's not going to be these slow subplots that build and build and build. He ain't Fabian Nicieza. You know what I'm saying? So like, I feel like we got the complete story here. It would have been cool to see this be threaded in a little bit more, but Riot at Xavier's, first of all, it was the return of Frank Whiteley, but if you notice, he's working with Avalon Studios, so you can definitely tell that not every figure is drawn by him and not every background is drawn by him. It's not quite as impressive, but like that moment where Beast is chasing down a burning glob, he's like, I'm the Inhuman Torch. Like that shit cracks me up. I love Riot at Xavier's. I think it's the high point of the series. What do you think, Verno?
I love it, man. Quentin Quire is one of my favorite characters. I think it's one of my favorite arcs of this whole thing. And then, like you said, getting quietly back after him being gone. That's like you just see how damn good he is when you can compare him to the other artists in here. But I think it's genius. It's interesting how different his character is. Like I had kind of forgotten how his characterized in this run. He's like a supervillain, like on the rise. I think they even call him that. Like they're seeing the rise of a supervillain. So he's not as funny as he is now, but I love the crap out of him. All of the students and all the interactions. I think, Rob, when you were on my show the first time, you had mentioned kind of offhandedly that like Morrison had introduced us, like he'd made the school a school. And I was like, I had to go back and like look through it. It was like, damn, nobody had ever done that before. Like made it that much of a student focused thing since it was just like the original 5 characters. So,
yeah, they're the oldest students you've ever seen. They've literally been in school for like 30 years.
And like the New Mutants were like, they were students for like, and they still call themselves the New Mutants now, oddly enough.
Right.
I think that was the first attempt to actually make like, after Kitty Pryde, to make, actual mutant students. It was never more than like, basically a super team's worth at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like
exactly.
Just a bunch of students who aren't superheroes. They're just students.
I'm sure Grant noticed it too. He's like, there's so many mutants in the world. Why does the X-Men only have the same like 16 students, like forever? Right. They should be instructors. And I hate to kind of give credit to Hollywood for this, but it was Hollywood that kind of like did that. And now that is such a factor of the X-Men books. You know what I'm saying? Like, not so much anymore. There's no school. They just got a whole damn island. In fact, they got a whole damn planet now. A lot of those ideas start here. And some of the questions that Quentin is raising, I should say, in his Riot, like, they're legitimate concerns. People still wear the Magneto was right shirt. Brian's got one. Is he wearing it right now? Of course he is.
I want one.
Brian, you're wearing the shirt. Obviously, you're a big Quentin fan. Tell us a little bit about what you think about this arc.
It's easily one of my favorites from this run. One of the things like I liked about it on this reread is like how he captures that rebellious teenage, spirit and things like that too. Because like, when we're younger, we definitely, tend to see things more, harder to see things across the spectrum, right? You're either this or this, and you feel very strongly about it. When you're younger, your emotions you have a harder time, reining in emotions and like, pulling back from stuff and everything like that. And I thought he captured that perfectly with Quentin and then some of the other kids he was roping in, and then bringing in Kick, bringing that drug in. So you also had that element of like, it's given this empowerment, but it's also, one of the side effects kicking in, one of the, like the negative consequences for, doing these things going to kick in. And it was pretty negative. I mean, like what Quentin set out to do basically turned out to be the opposite of everything. He couldn't foresee any of these things. And yeah, seeing, cause I was trying to think, cause I think the first issue may not have been done by Quietly. So when Quietly first drew Quentin, I was just like, holy crap, he looks so cool. With that, the pink mohawk and the, that, kind of trying to be imposing physique, but he's like really tiny. I don't know. It's just like the way, the way he's holding himself, like, it's like really cool.
It's very Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
Very Clockwork Orange.
Yeah. And, had to bring in a fashion element because that's important, for these, I don't know.
It's based on that old news story.
It's turned into stereotype.
Treasure.
Yeah. It's the idea of like
fear-mongering.
Yeah. I just recently, right before the stream, I had reread Grant's chapter in their book Super Gods, in which they talk about the new X-Men era and how much it felt like a prison to Grant Morrison, doing new X-Men for a while there. And they were talking about how he wanted to show the nerd as the supervillain. That's why Kick is in an inhaler, right? The nerdy sucking the inhaler, like, like Grant foresaw this rise of the downtrodden nerd, like becoming a bully as power presents itself. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a bit prophetic. Speaking of prophetic, Brooks, what do you think about Riot at Xavier's?
Well, I think this is probably my favorite. Like I said, this is probably my favorite part of Morrison's run. Like, I like the character. Like Quentin he starts out as this character who seems like he's a very ideal student, like maybe a little aloof. He might he kind of looks down on everybody, but he gets along. He doesn't make waves. He's Xavier, like, thinks he's a fine young man and all this. And then, like, just that revelation of, that he's adopted, that, his entire life isn't what he thought it was, just, like, causes him to, just completely, well, I think, I think he probably always had that kind of feeling, but, like, he felt like it gave him an excuse to, act out on his, worst impulses. It's like, oh, I've been traumatized, so of course I'm going to, rebel. But, I think I agree that he does have some valid points about, that, he does have, this idea that mutants have been like a very oppressed peoples, like for years and years, and like they've just sat and taken it. And he's like, well, who's to say, like, maybe Xavier's wrong? Maybe the peaceful way hasn't gotten us anywhere, and maybe Magneto was right, and he just, he just failed. But maybe we should try, maybe it's worth trying again, And the drugs, the whole drug thing, that's a very coming of age kind of teenager thing, and especially like a drug that would like amplify his powers, and also the idea that he's doing it to impress a girl. And who he ends up accidentally killing adds that kind of like tragic element to it. Mm-hmm. It's like a kind of that Romeo and Juliet style tragic end to the potential romance.
Yes.
Hell yeah. Synth Z says, I like Quentin on New X-Men a lot more than now. And GoFlow says, I hated Quentin so much in the Riot story arc. I can't believe that the writers managed to get me to like him more recently. Well, that's some really good work done by people like, in particular, Benjamin Percy, I think, has done some really great work with that character. I just wish his X-Force run was a little bit more focused. I don't feel like, I think Hickman has the most focused bits of X-Men right now, and the rest of the writers are just like trying to do what they're wanting to do, which may be different, but at the same time trying to fit it in. Like, it just doesn't, X-Force hasn't felt as defined and as focused to me as it did in the first few issues. But we're talking about modern X-Men there. Now it's time for Murder at the Mansion. Murder at the Mansion is probably my least favorite story. It's kind of cliche. It's a little typical. We bring in Bishop and Sage, and it's cool, but unfortunately, it's the Extreme X-Men Claremont version of Bishop and Sage, so it doesn't quite work for me. But I still like the arc. It's interesting enough. I buy the idea that Emma. But by the way, this is about Emma Frost gets assassinated. She gets murdered at the mansion, right? And
after Jean finds out that her and Scott were having a tryst.
That's right. So, there's some stuff in between there, right? But it's Phil Jimenez coming back on the artwork. That's great. I love seeing Phil on this book. And there's just something about this run that, like, even though it's just one of those 3-issue stories, it just has bored me at the time. It bores me now. Like, the whole idea, it was, I don't remember which one. It was Esme? Yes, Esme. Because Sophie had died already, right?
Yeah.
Sophie dies at the end of the Riot at Xavier's because she's the one that stops Quentin. And Quentin's left in this, he's allegedly evolved beyond, right? So,
I was confused by that. And I know we're in Murder at the Mansion, but does Zorn heal him or kill him? Because Charles Xavier, he says so much wasted potential after he does that. So, like, and we don't really see him again until like that Here Comes Tomorrow thing. But I was always confused by the end.
That's a good point.
Because it goes dark. You know, I mean, you're seeing him.
What's going
doubling
on?
up.
What is this?
This channel's going to be amazing now.
There's so many Robbies. Which one do you look at, Robbie? Oh, okay.
So now you've got full station room. You need that extra room for the arm.
I think I'm back now.
You are back. Looking good.
Hell yeah. Let me turn this one off. I just heard like 4 echoes of my voice. It was like I was in a fucking other world. All right. It looks like Xfinity fixed their shit. Anyway, what's going on? Hey. What are we talking about? I can't hear you because you're turned all the way down. I'm so stupid.
Yeah,
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
We're good now.
I know we moved into Murder at the Mansion, but I was like, I don't know. I was kind of confused by the end of Riot at Xavier's because I couldn't figure out if Zorn killed Quentin.
Well, the idea was that he was supposed to heal him, but that they say in the book that he evolved. Like Xavier says something.
I think the kick like escalated his power so much that he couldn't exist within his body. So like he had to basically his essence, psychic essence or whatever, had to leave his body like a cocoon.
Bro, he pulled an L. Ron Hubbard is what he did.
Which we talked about Scientology when you were out, by the way.
Oh, damn it. I missed it.
Yeah, you did. You did. So, okay. Yeah. I was thrown by that one, because, I don't know. I guess you're thinking he's coming in to heal him. And then, and they were talking, he was having some kind of secondary mutation happening. And
they're like Beast was like, maybe it's a secondary mutation. Maybe it was about the kick or something like that. But now we're on Murder of the Mansion and Emma is shattered in her diamond form. So, that's a very special fucking bullet. Did they ever really explain how special the bullet was? Maybe they did.
It was a diamond
hit her
bullet.
Flaw.
It's a diamond bullet that hit her her flaw perfectly.
Yep.
And I guess Esme telepathically got Angel to do it.
Yeah.
I still don't like that fucking story. I think it's so wonky. I think it's the worst story in the whole arc. What do you think, Verno?
I think it's one of the lesser stories in the run, but I still enjoy it quite a bit. I think Bishop's character design and the way he looks is kind of weird, but I love Beacon Angel, so that kind of does it for me. I love a whodunit, and honestly, I'm a forgetful fuck, like big time. So I forget who done it every time I read it. So I enjoy that. It gets me every time. I dig it.
All right, what about you then, Brian?
Yeah, I agree. It's not one of my favorite. It's not my favorite section of the overall run. It does advance some stories though. I mean, it definitely keeps the pace going, and yeah, it's a traditional mystery kind of thing. But I guess in this reread, this was part of Magneto's plan, right? I felt like at this time he'd already kind of pulled Esme away.
Was Esme? She was she was working with him.
Yeah.
In some capacity.
I think this is where that either started or kind of thing. So I thought that was cool, piecing that together as it went on and everything. And I didn't read comics in the early 90s, so I knew who Bishop was. So I didn't have much attachment to him, and I wasn't sure what he was doing. But
I love Bishop so much. This is my least favorite era of Bishop, where he was space cop. I liked it better when he was killing millions of people trying to kill the baby Hope for some reason. But all of it, Bishop's never been good since the fucking 90s. By the way,
does he get used as a detective at other times? Because reading, this is my only experience seeing him in this kind of a role.
That was kind of the point of the Extreme X-Men, is that they were kind of
Brooks read the Extreme X-Men, so
I read the first 5 issues, I think, of Extreme X-Men. It wasn't very good. I don't know if it got better later on, but it was kind of Chris Claremont doing the X-Men the traditional way that he was, used to doing it. Extreme X-Men didn't really fit in with the X books at the time as much.
It did not, man. So Claremont had been hired back to do the X-Men right as the movie was launching. Okay. And he did the whole Revolution arc, which I know Brooks has read, I think, lately, because I think I gave you my old copies of it, right? But Cyclops was dead. That's why they keep talking about the Insaba Noor shit. That annoys me. Morrison barely picks up on a lot of threads that were left dangling, but that's the one that you're going to keep going back, that Cyclops feels depressed because he was possessed by Apocalypse. And they kind of already had covered that in the search for Cyclops or whatever. By the way, it's shameful that Morrison didn't get a chance to do an Apocalypse story. Because can you imagine that? That could have been really freaking cool, I think.
Definitely.
What if I would have bought it more if Zorn was one of the horsemen of Apocalypse. Oh my God, I'm rewriting New X-Men right now. It's not a Magneto story. It's an Apocalypse story. And by the way, speaking about Beak, in Riot at Xavier's, you get to see Frank Quitely draw Beak. That's the best.
Yeah.
Beak is so fucking cute.
Mm-hmm.
Drawn by nobody else. Nobody else can do it. Nobody else can do it for some reason. But
he's ugly cute. That's hard to pull off, to make someone that ugly, but cute as all hell. And that's part of his character, too, in the writing and the dialogue. He's adorable.
Yeah. Speaking of ugly cute, Brooks, what did you think of Murder at the Mansion?
Yeah, it's not one of the stronger stories in the run. But, I mean, I like the idea, he's trying to do a kind of murder mystery just out of nowhere. And I like seeing I think it was Beast who was doing most of the detective work, I think. Well,
he was putting Emma back together. Yeah, and Bishop was doing the detective.
Going around talking to all the X-Men, like he talks to Jean's like, you have the best motive. And she's like, well, do you believe it? And he's like, no. And it does have I like the end where Jean Grey kinetically fuses Emma Frost back together. Yes, because it feels kind of like a no hard feelings kind of move on her part.
She even says something like she's glory standing. She's trying to make me fucking look bad or some shit.
It's like Emma's just not having it. It's like
that was a big problem that Perch and Joe had, was that Emma came back together and it was just fine. But I get it, because in the book, they mention in her diamond form, she's indestructible, right? So that meant that she was still clinging on her consciousness. So, yeah, Beast putting the pieces back together seems a little preposterous, right? But Jean being able to fix it, I buy that.
Right.
Because Jean's displaying levels of power that she's never shown in the comics before. Because we got to remember, in the original Phoenix, that wasn't Jean. That was a clone. Remember? Yeah. So Jean was in a cocoon in the bottom of the East River or some shit. I don't know. But so, yeah.
Well, yeah, I just remember one of my favorite lines from Emma was, I think, in this story when Esme says she's going to leave and calls her a wrinkled up old hag. And she goes, I'm 27.
Right.
She's 20, say yeah. But it just goes to show you the youth. And that's something that Morrison's dealing with the theme in here. And we'll get to that a little bit later. One of my favorite bits with Emma is in the lead into the story, like right as she's about to die. It's a really great bit is when her and Wolverine have this really just a really nice conversation like together. And Logan is there for her. You know what I'm saying? And she even says, like, why did I have to fall in love with Scott Summers? Like, that's a heartbreaking moment in this run that I think is pretty solid. So
that line's significant. Just her saying that, it gives a different perspective on her, like seducing Scott the whole time.
Because you think she's just trying to fuck with Jean, right? Until that moment, and then you realize, no, she's got it bad for old Slim, man.
Understandable.
Yeah. And who wouldn't? You know, James Marsden played him in the movie. He's a handsome man. You know, he was Corky in the Hairspray musical movie adaptation. Anyway, let's talk about Assault on Weapon Plus. I love this run. Chris Bachalo, I don't really like a lot of his work nowadays, but I adored his work in this era, and I love it. I freaking love this run. Now, a big thing they wanted to do, Joe Quesada, with his cup of Joe, maybe he was too jacked up on coffee like Bueller, and he had the crazy idea, let's reveal the origin of Wolverine, because they're going to do it in the movies, so we got to do it first, right? And so Morrison wasn't tasked with creating the origin, but he was tasked with dealing with creating the moment in which Wolverine finds out who he is, right?
He has Cassandra Nova, use his real name.
Yeah.
Earlier on.
She calls him James.
Yeah.
And so it was built into it. So Morrison didn't have to deal directly with that, but just with Logan figuring it out. But so after Jean busts in on Emma and Scott basically fucking in their minds, or about to, while she's dressed in the Dark Phoenix costume, which is a little kinky and weird, I've never asked one of my girlfriends to dress like my ex. Like, that's a terrible, terrible thing to do. But if you look at the motivation of Cyclops, and what Emma was trying, Emma knows Cyclops, and he remember, this is the dude that had a kid with her evil clone. Okay. So there's a lot of weird skeletons in Cyclops's closet. But he goes off, and of course, like most dudes do when they're having marital problems and they get found out for cheating, they go spend the night at strip club, and then their buddy Logan shows up and decides, hey, why don't you go with me to this fucking crazy ass place with Phantom X and go against Weapon 15, which such a built up threat but gets taken out so easily, basically off screen, which is kind of annoying to me. At this point, we know Morrison was already planning on going back to DC, had 6 months left in their contract with Marvel, and was just kind of keeping their head down and trying to not make too many waves. That's really funny to think about when you think about what's about to happen in Planet X. What do you think about Assault on Weapon Plus? Because I loved it. The reintegration of Phantom X into the story, the idea of the Weapon Plus program, which is still being used, I think is a fantastic idea. What do you think, Verno, about the story?
I love it, man. It's I think my favorite aspect of it is that it's so Morrison. It's so complex. Just the idea of the world and, freezing time and all that, doing experiments with time. But it's actually a really simple story, guys. It's about Cyclops. It's about Cyclops and his marriage the whole time. There's all this crazy action going on, all this sci-fi setting, but Phantom X and Cyclops are just having discussions about a dude that just fucked up, kind of.
And remember that Cyclops is drunk as shit.
That's a good point. I never considered that. He is drunk, headed into the world. And then it's about Wolverine trying to find out about his past. So it's a layered story. The art, as you're talking about, that was one thing I didn't get Bachalo at first. I love it now going through it. And I do agree that his newer stuff, that nonstop Spider-Man, I didn't like that at all. But he's on fire in this arc for sure. And then Phantom X, he's the shit. I love him.
Hell yeah, Phantom X is the greatest. Speaking of the greatest, Brian, that was the segue that worked in your favor. What do you think about the story of Assault on Weapon Plus? And by the way, we do have Comics Will Break Your Heart in the house tonight. So station, Jennifer, and well done today, filling in for Bob on the Coffee and Comics show on Comics with Bueller, because that's not easy shoes to fill, and you filled them expertly well.
Okay. Yeah. So,
Ryan's like, that was a weird segue. It was a good segue, and then all that happened. Now I don't know what to say.
Yeah. You gave me a good segue, and then, I appreciate it. So, I liked this reread through this part a lot better this time. I did love the story to begin with, but, and one super nerdy thing that I noticed, by the way, is that each first page, the first page from each issue shows a foot going down on the ground. And I was thinking that
I actually noticed that for the first time on this read. For the first time, I've never noticed that before. Yeah,
likewise. And I was wondering, I guess it made me think, like, because each issue is in a completely different locale, and it's kind of like, maybe it's helping you set where these different places are and everything.
What real quick, the one thing structurally I do want to say about the way Morrison handled every issue of New X-Men was each issue started with one page and like basically a line that got you going immediately. Like you were into it from the get-go, Oh
yeah. Yeah. And the first issue, like I read it on the plane the other day, by the way. I was laughing out loud when Cyclops was like, "Who's that guy over at the table? He keeps winking at me." And that's how Phantom X is trying to get his attention while he's ordering medicine or whatever on the phone. I mean, like, Phantom X is just awesome.
Great.
It's just so cool. And one of my kind of favorite panels that, it's full page drawing from is it Bachalo?
It's Bachalo or Bachalo. I've heard it both. So
okay, but
we can just call him Chrissy B if you really want to.
Okay, Chrissy B. When they get into the world and it's Cyclops and Wolverine and Phantom X, and they're just like, it's that moment before things are about to, get heavy, and they're just sitting there, just all three of them just looking so badass, ready to jump in, man. I don't know. I love that part, but yeah, it's pretty good, in-depth story, and brings a lot of elements in it. And so I guess this is where they first brought in Captain America as part of Weapon Plus 2, right? Because he's Weapon 1.
And they even mentioned Weapon 0, which turned out to be Isaiah Bradley.
Back in the day, somehow fall into the Weapon Plus program.
What's that?
Like all the different iterations of Captain America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know. I absolutely love this story, man. I don't know.
It's a really cool story, and this is something I always say as a highlight of what I love about Grant Morrison's work. Morrison will throw an idea out there, and Morrison will just use it for an idea that's thrown out there. I mean, New X-Men ain't got shit on the Invisibles, okay? And by the way, we're wrapping up season 3 20 months from now with the Invisibles, and that's going to be a Teen Dog Shades night, and it's going to be fun, okay? But more like this idea of the world, other writers would have made an entire run about this. In fact, Rick Remender kind of did that, okay? Yeah. Hickman kind of steals some of this stuff in his Avengers run, I think, a little bit with his version of the world, right? And then they go back, now they're doing the Vault, like it's kind of the same concept. Morrison was in on this idea of evolution was so important to the X-Men. And that's what the book is about. And artificial intelligence, machines, that's a part of it. And the world is something that is just a set dressing for Morrison. And for other people, it would literally be, this whole run, 3 years about the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's fascinating to me. The ideas we get from Grant, he's like a Jack Kirby. Just you always get something new, whether it's elaborated on or not. It's cool because you get another writer who can years later have a very successful run building on that. So I think that's something that's really, really interesting. Brooks, what do you think about the Assault on Weapon Plus story?
Yeah, I think this is one of the better story arcs in this run as well. The thing I liked about this arc is the Cyclops Wolverine dynamic, because like back in the day, Cyclops and Wolverine have always had this adversarial relationship. Like a lot of it has to do with Cyclops is like the uptight, straight-laced leader type, and Wolverine's the kind of do whatever the fuck I want type of guy. They tend to clash over that. And, Wolverine's carrying the torch for Jean still. But in this story arc, it shows, like, when it comes down to it, Wolverine trusts Cyclops, and Cyclops has Wolverine's back. Because, like, their bond as X-Men is stronger than any, disagreements they might have had over the years.
And their friendship's stronger, too. Like, let's be honest about this.
So he says, like, there's no one I trust to watch my back more than Scott Summers.
And Logan is also trying to get Scott to realize that he loves Jean, and he needs to go back to that. Like, that's... Most other writers wouldn't handle it that way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I really like that. I like that Morrison decided to focus on Scott developing a new relationship and not focus so much on the Jean and Wolverine thing. And nowadays, who knows what's going on up on the moon, because it's wild.
Well, they're all banging.
Yeah, right? Speaking of
Everybody's
wild,
banging.
Speaking of wild, make more mutants. Rule number 1, right? Until you get to the latest issue, Way of X, and then there's some implications there. Like, are they like Catholics? Like, they gotta have sex to procreate only? Like, what's going on there? Let's talk about Planet X. Planet X is the culmination of everything. It's the reveal that Magneto has been Zorn the entire time. At the time, y'all, Brooks, do you remember this? We were like, what the fuck? We were like blown away. We felt so stupid. We're like, it is obvious. His powers, it's so obvious. Why were we not thinking about this? And I never noticed this bit until the Comics by Perch retrospective. But when Esme leaves and nobody's driving the cab, and they're like, that was a clue to let you know that Magneto was moving the cab away. Like, that's a little weird. Like, I think the power set's kind of there for the most part. I just wish they would have explained not how he was able to mask his mind from telepaths, but how he was able to give out like a fake impression. I would have liked to have known that.
Maybe Phantom X running.
It's misdirection, mon ami. But I feel like Phantom X, by the way, is a really cool version of Gambit. Okay.
Yeah.
So like,
it's kind of that same kind of mutant thief type.
Yeah. So
dashing rogue.
So Planet X, Zorn is revealed as Magneto. He starts his new brotherhood, and the whole idea is that Magneto is this out of touch old guy who's read too much fantasy books, who doesn't understand the youth or the movement that his image has given. And the reason for that shirt, Brian, and let me make you bigger so you can... Fuck, I hit the wrong button. Let me make you larger so that everybody can see it fully. What's the Cuban revolutionary that everybody was wearing shirts of? It was
Guevara.
Yeah, right? Morrison wanted to reference that. Mm-hmm. That most people wearing these shirts don't even understand the ideology that goes behind that person. And that was kind of what Morrison wanted to say with what they did with here. And even in the book Super Gods, Morrison admits that he ruined the character of Magneto. He went in a different direction. He made him addicted to drugs. Yeah. But I get the idea. He's getting older. He's trying to he wants to flip the world around, which is something they wanted to do in the Magneto War, but they didn't go through with it. And the original idea that Joe Kelly and Steven Seagal had for the Magneto War was that he did flip the world around and Storm dies. And then they didn't want to do that. They fired them, and Alan Davis came in and basically wrote what Bob Harris and Mark Powers wanted them to do. Mark Powers, by the way, didn't last long through the Morrison run. I think Mike Martz was the editor for most of it, right? Is that his name? Mike Martz? He was Grant's editor on a lot of the Batman stuff. Anyway, Planet X is the big culmination, the big finale. Phil Jimenez on the artwork. We can't get quietly. We get the next best thing, Phil Jimenez. I love this cat's work. We'll be talking about it next month on Comics Revisited. We'll announce that in a moment. But I like it. It's got some problems, but for the most part, I buy it. I get into it. I dig it. And I hate that they immediately undid all of this because, by the way, in X-Men continuity, that was never Magneto that did any of that shit. It was this metaphysical space Zorn entity, the Collective. Some shit Bendis did in New Avengers. Really? Yeah. Yes. They immediately, Marvel jumped away from the Morrison. Everything Morrison laid out, they jumped away from. And it wasn't until the newer generation of writers, really with Jason Aaron, is where it kind of started, where they get back to what Morrison was doing. And obviously these are writers and creators that were influenced by this run. What do you think about Planet X, the big finale, not the finale, but the big finale? What do you think, Verno?
There's aspects of it that I love. It's a little wonky, the whole, there's the Zorn Magneto stuff. We've already beat that to death a little bit, but I love all the big stuff. I love the students kind of realizing like, well, this guy's kind of full of shit. And like what you brought up before about Magneto not realizing who he is, he's become this symbol and he doesn't actually he doesn't realize what he's representing. And then just him being out of touch. And I think that's a big part of what the whole run is about, is like there's a new generation. Like there's a big break. The world is different in the year 2000 than it was in 1991, like big time. And
yes.
He's kind of realizing that. So I love that. I love Beak's role. I like that he's the one that he has the moral high ground, I guess. Whatever the fuck he does, where he's the one that decides what's
he's part of the brotherhood that like, no, we're not going to go through with this shit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
because this is the most hodgepodge-ass fucking brotherhood of mutants that Magneto has ever put together.
Right. I like that. One of my problems in previous read-throughs was how crazy Magneto seems at the end. But I think I understood like the effects of the kick more the whole time. So it just made more sense to me.
What would it be like if an 80-year-old dude just fucking did heroin all of a sudden?
Right. And then it's got the best line of the whole series when Magneto bitch slaps Beak, says vegetable. It's like the most ridiculous thing you could ever put on a comic book page, but it cracks me up every time.
Magneto's a junkie, man. That's the thing, and it's not something that like, it doesn't seem so obvious that Magneto would do that, but maybe I really feel like, because you find out that Zorn is the reason why Kick's been leaking in, right? Zorn's the one, like it was Quentin at first, but then like Zorn's kind of like twisting these kids' minds, and some of the best parts in this entire run, like that whole thing is it's during the riot at Xavier's when Zorn takes the kids away on a retreat, bruh, and he has to go kill those people. Some of the new men, is it U-men? And he like Angel sees them and he goes, "This will be our secret."
Right.
That's when you're like, what the fuck is going on with Zorn? I like Zorn, and that's why I love that one character who the entire time is like, what happened to Zorn? I liked Zorn. He was nice. And Magneto's like, Zorn was a fake. It was a fallacy. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right? I love it. Brian, what do you think about Planet X?
You kind of covered some of my things with it. As far as like the things I kind of had an issue with is like, it just doesn't seem like Magneto would do drugs. Even though, like, at his age, he probably wouldn't understand, like, how the negative consequences are going to kick in, and all these other things. It just seems beneath his ego.
He's like, just one more time.
One more time. As a means to get what he wanted,
Right. Well, so that's where I was going, is that, like, I think I kind of figured out it was probably, like, to be able to switch the poles, he was needing that, that power boost to be able to actually pull off that power. But, I know this is straight up nitpicky, but how the hell does Toad talk? I mean, that tongue fills his entire mouth.
Remember, Toad was in the movie, and he was one of the only henchmen of Magneto's that had lines. So.
That's true. But no, overall, like, there's a lot I liked about it. The art was like pretty stunning. The double page splash where he's like kind of going through the city and things are just tearing up around him and everything. Yeah. I mean, just insane stuff.
Let me blow that up.
Great.
I'd love to actually see this recolored. Add a little bit more. What the fuck am I doing? There we go.
But damn, that's the kind of tablet you read comics on, Verno.
Dude, I've been meaning to say this to you, brother, because I saw a picture of you, your computer reading digital comics. I'm like, bro. Fucking drop the money, get an iPad Pro.
But I rarely read. First of all, in my old computer, I have a larger monitor and I could hook it up to this. But when I'm reading these Spawns, this is the perfect size for me because I just like it's. I don't know why I love reading Spawn on this fucking laptop. But you're right. I got many technological things to get before I get a bigger tablet. But you're right, like that's the way to read comics.
Chats out there, folks. We need to give Robbie an iPad Pro.
What's a tablet? We're like the Rosetta Stone. Is it? What are we talking about there?
It's very similar. Very similar.
You need a chisel?
Fucking Jennifer, their mind in the gutter or the heavens says Toad will do what Batman won't.
That's true. Yeah.
I
Very
hope
true.
so.
Very true.
I hope so. It's like if Gene Simmons didn't give oral sex on other women, like that would be a misuse of God-given ability, right?
Right.
Very true.
He's got a
Very
long
true.
tongue.
We got it.
Anyway.
We're with it.
Okay. Brooks, what do you think about Planet X? Oh, wait. Brian, what do you say?
All I was going to say is that last fight was fucking amazing to me.
Yes.
I mean, it was so visceral. And, I mean, it just...
Well, what about the Wolverine
everybody just
Gene
kept
stuff?
coming in.
The Wolverine Gene stuff. Like
Oh,
they,
yeah.
I hate the idea they cut in Gene's there and Wolverine's. She's like, what happened to Weapon 15? He's like, I killed him when he wasn't looking. Like, bro, really? Like, Phantom X has been building this motherfucker up for like issues. Like, you can't kill him, and then Wolverine's like, I killed him.
It's the ultimate.
Yeah,
You know,
but he just gets got like that. I think Morrison was like, time to run, time to end. I'm going to go do 7 Soldiers of Victory and filth.
Yeah.
What about you, Brooks? What do you think about Planet X?
I remember like loving it back when it came out. Like, you know, it was such a good Magneto story. Now I like the this idea of Magneto as this old crotchety guy who just doesn't understand, you know, young people. Like even in how Esme is like has a crush on him and thinks that, you know, that he's gonna return those affections. But he's just like, you're a child,
Right.
and he's like the way he just manipulates them, and like he's like,
I'm glad you mentioned that, Brooks.
This is
Brooks, real
I have
quick.
the authority.
Real
That's
quick,
what I
Brooks.
represent.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I've seen criticism on this. There's like, oh, Morrison just wanted this run to end with a junkie Magneto that was shacking up with a 15-year-old. No, that's not what happened.
Yeah, like he let her
Exactly.
along, but
She was in love with an older man, which happens,
yeah,
but he didn't.
Like he was
didn't
manipulating her, and even it's like that's basically what he says. Like, I was manipulating you. Like he just comes out and says it at the end. Like that's what I do. I'm you know, he is the villain.
And he kills the one kid in anger and
Yeah,
frustration.
he killed Basilisk just because Basilisk was pissing him off.
I want to see him resurrected. By the way,
Yeah, right?
in the new
Like, where's
era.
he at?
Yes,
He's got to be
absolutely.
in Krakoa somewhere.
Right. Yep.
Basilisk was basically like he was like the personification of like every annoying thing that teenagers do, like completely unfiltered. Like all he does is make stupid fart jokes and laugh.
That's why
Right.
Magneto kills him, is because he just makes a joke and he's like, take this seriously. Like, it's crazy. Magneto's not used to the youth. You know, he had Toad, he had Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, he had Mastermind.
Yeah,
He had
toadies.
Wait, Brooks, I want to know in particular. Here's something I really like about this arc is that Grant focuses more on the Scott and Emma bit, and he seems to make it seem like Logan has made peace with the idea that Logan will never be with Jean, that it wouldn't work. But those ending moments of Jean and Logan this is an emotional ass arc for me. I cried one time in 2015 after my rebirth coming out of the hospital. I reread New X-Men. And the last bit there, first of all, Jean gets killed by Logan, because Logan thinks she's going to die anyway and he's going to end her suffering. And then that sparks the Phoenix to like come in. And I love the bit too where she's like, I'm back, but I don't know how long, right? Like it's already established that it's just for a short bit. And then I would have liked it more as if she burned out her power, but Magneto gives her this like brain aneurysm or some shit and she dies. But that moment when she's dying and all the shit that her and Scott went through, and she looks at Scott and she says her last words are, live, Scott, live. All I ever did was die on you. And bruh, that moment still, when I didn't cry this time because I'm not as sensitive as I was at that moment in 2015, but like seriously, like that moment gets me. And I think it's one of the best written X-Men moments of all time, man.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but that kind of I don't like the all I ever did was die on you part of that line, because that's obviously not true.
Because it was a clone.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Scott and Jean's relationship is more than just Jean dying on Scott. Like they've been together for like a long time. They were like original X-Men together. Like that relationship.
Yeah, let's be
way
honest
more
though, man.
Let's die on.
We got to be
know?
very honest, bro. Okay, because like most of the relationship of Scott and Jean is defined by the idea that she died. Like, okay,
well,
I mean, and I get it, and I think
Scott that angst.
I think Morrison is making a grander statement than just about Jean and Scott in that particular moment in time. I don't know, but it hits me. It hits me like fucking crazy. It means like fucking live. Like all I ever did was die on you means I wasn't connected. I wasn't there.
I totally get that Jean would say like, go, move on, don't, carry a torch for me. Go on and enjoy your life. But
it's not about physical death.
Saying like, all I ever did was die on you. I don't think she would say that.
It's not about physical death. I mean, it's not just about physical death. It's about the idea of a partner who's not committed fully. And that's something that I have dealt with and that I know Brian has dealt with and who knows what Verno has been through in his life. I don't know. I'm sure.
My fiance doesn't even love me. So what are you going to do?
Well, fuck, dude, but when a lover is dying on you, it doesn't necessarily mean a physical death, but maybe an emotional one. And so that was a moment that really meant something to me. And even with the idea of like, if we just waste our lives away and don't actually do what our gift allows us to do and actually be that bright, shining city on the hill that Jesus talked about, for instance, if we can't do that, then we're dying on the world. Does that make sense? And this just emotionally fucking gets me, man. Anyway,
well,
then, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, that's one of the aspects of like the whole affair that I like. And it's not like Morris isn't necessarily like victim blaming, saying like Jean deserved it, but they do kind of bring up the fact that her leaning into her phoenixiness makes her emotionally detached. So it's like it takes two kind of a thing is the lesson that I take out of that for a marriage.
Yeah. And like, I mean, the idea is so sad, but it's so true. And it's so of the modern experience of two lovers together, thinking they're together forever. Two lovers together forever. I don't know if Brooks remembers that reference, but that's really funny that popped in my head. But like the idea of making a commitment to someone and then realizing years down the road, I can't live up to this. I'm not into this. I'm dying on this person. I don't know. Maybe getting a little bit too deep. Anyway, but that's how the run ends. Basically, they defeat Magneto. Wolverine cuts off his head. Don't worry, it wasn't really Magneto. He shows up in Chris Claremont's Excalibur just a few years later. But so then there's that. And then there's an epilogue. And this is something for instance, when Scott Snyder did Last Night on Earth as his last Batman story, he said, well, Grant Morrison talked to me and said, if you're doing a big run on a character or a book, you got to end it with your vision of the future so that you make your statement because other people are going to come in and change it. So make your statement on where it goes. And that's what Morrison did with Here Comes Tomorrow. Now, at the time, I was a big ass comic book snob and I didn't like any of the Image guys, or at least I pretended not to like any of the Image guys, including Mark Silvestri. So I was like, oh, this is the worst arc yet. The art is just terrible. It's just pinups, this and that. On the reread now, being so into the zeitgeist of 90s Image and being a fan of Rob Liefeld all of a sudden, as well as Todd McFarlane, Mark Silvestri is one of the best fucking artists out of all of those guys.
Fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fucking amazing. And I got to remember and give mad props to the early days of The Darkness. Like, I loved The Darkness because of him and Del Keown and Garth Ennis, obviously. Bruh. So Mark Silvestri's artwork in this one is awesome. And we'll be getting into art in just a second. But Here Comes Tomorrow, I did not like at first. But the more, each time I revisit this run, the more I like this arc. Seeing where Morrison would have taken it. But at the same time, it's the road not taken because they change history. If you remember, they bring in Sublime yet again. I think that was a cool way to wrap that up. Maybe Sublime wasn't the villain, but also to see the redemption of Cassandra Nova. That was something really cool because at the end of that initial story arc with Imperial, they didn't want to kill Cassandra. They wanted to rehabilitate her. It looks like it worked. It took 150 fucking years, but it worked. Seeing Beak's offspring, his great grandson or whatever, like that was dope. Seeing Wolverine and Jean back together, that was really, I really like the arc. It's dynamic, it's big, it's explosive, and it's a sad book to me because I was like, man, what could have Morrison done if he was happy at Marvel and continued on? What do you think about this final arc, this epilogue, if you will, Verno?
Same thing with what you said, where every time that I've read this, I've liked it a little bit more. And this time, I actually understood it more than I ever understood it. Like the first time I read it, I don't even think I got that was descendant of Beak. I didn't get that Eva. Like the first time, there's so many new things that you're dealing with. This time, I really loved it. And just the idea that we know that there's an extinction event coming for the humans. And this is that extinction event. This is what happens in the future after that. It's an interesting idea. And as you were saying, I think this is I don't know. It's one of the best artists on the run. I fucking love the art. It's the most Wolverine that we get, which it's not a downside for the run that there's not that much Wolverine. I think we've had plenty of him, but it's nice to get a nice Wolverine story at the end to wrap it up, man. I think it's confusing still. We talked about it earlier. There's Sublime elements that I don't fully grasp Sublime in general. I don't know if one of you guys can clear that up, but I loved it, man. I think it's pretty damn dope.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused on the Sublime angle as well. I mean, I thought it was good to reintroduce it as, this kind of enduring force that's, chaotic in nature and not, I mean, I guess evil, but at the same time, I mean, it's obviously, bent on destruction and clearing things out. And I loved it. I love it as the coda to the run. I thought of it also as kind of a nod to Days of Future Past, because it, it accelerates into the future and then they, do some of the redoing of it. But like, because in their manifesto, that was one of the, and I know Perch and them touched on this a lot too, but because they start off by talking about how really the only X-Men run worth reading is Claremont and Byrne. And he refuses to read anything after that, and so, when I was reading that led me to, start looking for those types of influences in there. And then, that one really struck me as a great, tribute to that Days of Future Past, which is, super cool story. And the art in it, to me, like I've always been a Mark Silvestri fan. I missed a lot of that 90s stuff, but I was getting some of the stuff in the tail end, and I love the darkness. And I know some of it, some of the stuff is out of proportion still in weird ways, not like cool ways. But some
in
of
dynamic ways, bro. In dynamic ways.
Yeah. Well, there's one drawing of Emma Frost that just, I don't know, just the proportions.
I don't know what's
weird.
going on in Emma Frost's area down there in some of the shots.
Yeah.
Well, it's what Igor Cordy, he loves to draw crotches. And
he does, dude.
He's big into crotches, yeah. So we get into good Emma crotch in this one. It looks like a horny cat.
It's just all sprawled out and shit. Like, tell me, Scott.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like this, man.
So you're having marriage problems, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that shot from your night job, right, Brian?
Right.
So and another thing that I picked up on is that in the House of X Powers of 10, Hickman's bringing in the Chimera Nightcrawlers, and I must have completely forgotten that was from this run because I was just like, when I read it, I went, holy shit. I mean, I've read this comic like 3 or 4 times. And, Nightcrawler is one of my all-time favorite characters. And this is the only time he's really used, except for there's a group shot at the school. And he's like, and that's it. In the whole run, I would say that would probably be one of my biggest detractors from this run is that, Nightcrawler's not in there. But the Chimera Nightcrawler thing is an ingenious idea. Like,
yeah, he did.
Was on
like he would be the best. I'm sorry.
I was going
was on the Uncanny.
Yeah, Morrison didn't seem to want to use Nightcrawler for some reason, and so Joe Casey got a hold of him, and then Chuck Austin.
Okay,
they ruined him with that Catholic priest shit.
There's some nice Ron Garney artwork in that era, though, for Uncanny. Anyway, what were you saying, Brian?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, mapping them all onto teleporting. You're teleporting one, and then I don't know. I just thought that was an ingenious.
I was reading when I was rereading this, Brian. It struck me that Hickman pulled from this because what Sinister is trying to do, what they're doing with like the whole point of Powers of 10, right, is pulled from the end of New X-Men. Mm-hmm. The idea of combining mutant powers. That's something Sublime's trying to do. And let's be honest, maybe this run would been a little bit better and connected a little bit more with old school fans if Sublime was Sinister. Like you just take out the John Sublime, and Sublime came back. Brian Wood, I know, utilized him in his run of X-Men, which was kind of lackluster. Speaking of lackluster, Brooks, what do you think about Here Comes Tomorrow?
Well, I'm not caring much for this arc because it was one of those kind of like what if alternate future stories. But on the reread, I actually liked it pretty good. I liked I liked Rover, the friendly Sentinel. Like they need to bring Rover into the X-Men more. I think
that would be dope.
That would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's just Morrison like just going all out. He's like he can just do whatever he wants to at this point because he's writing about a potential future.
Yeah, he's like Loki in episode 2 where he's like, there's no consequences.
I'll just hide in this apocalypse.
But I do like how he's tying it back into Days of Future Past. If first of all, this is something Scott Snyder says he learned from Morrison. If you want to do a run, if you're doing an extended run, tell us your ending. That's why Morrison did the whole Batman 666 bit where Damian becomes Batman, right? Mm-hmm. And we got to see a little bit of their version of the future of Gotham and Batman. And also always cover the big bits. And, I know that Joe and Perch kind of joked about how at the time the only trades available were Days of Future Past and Dark Phoenix Saga. So that's what Morrison pulled from, right? Because Morrison is well more versed in DC continuity than they are Marvel, okay? And that's just the truth. But I like it. Those are the 2 biggest X-Men stories of all time for some fucking reason, and they've maintained that through Age of Apocalypse, through Fatal Attractions, through Executioner's Song, through Mutant Genesis. No matter what has come, Hoxpox, it doesn't matter. This has stood the test of time, this Claremont run. And I know Claremont is not a fan of Morrison's run, and to be honest, Claremont's not a fan of any other writer's run on X-Men except for his own. And I've met Claremont several times, and I can tell you that for certain. He is not a humble man. I'll tell you that. He's a fascinating man, though. I love Chris. Chris is a super cool dude. But
we wouldn't be talking about it without him.
This is so ingrained, I think, and feels more Claremont than any of the X-Men in the fucking 90s. Claremont left for a reason. He didn't like what Bob and Mark wanted to do with the franchise. And this feels more in line with that, and I really like it. So, all right, that's the end of the arc. That's the end of the run. And we went on some time for that. So we're going to hit some other points real quick here, but I just want to encapsulate everything overall with everything we've discussed. I still say this is my favorite X-Men run of all time. It's outdated at times. The Beast pretending he's gay bit is a bit tone deaf. But at the time, I even think Morrison's trying to make the point because Cyclops even tells him this is tone deaf, basically. He's like, nobody's going to think this is funny but you, bro. Like, this isn't it. There's some moments,
think it's hilarious. I love it.
It's also something of the time, right? It's like Morrison was trying to, and Morrison has obviously always been a part of a subculture, right? So like, but is the moment, the problematic moments today, reading it today, not maybe back then, but today, like the one Basilisk keeps calling things gay or whatever, but that's just something you see in things back in those days. But for instance, the 2 things is like when Beast says, I might as well be gay. I'm like any other oppressed group. Well,
like, he has good intentions. He wants to give like gay people somebody to look up to, I guess.
Yeah, but he's not gay. Like, he's like, don't falsify.
Not the way to do it.
The other thing
that Scott brings it up. If Scott doesn't point out that it's wrong, like Morrison's aware that it's wrong, or else Scott wouldn't know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Beast, he seems so innocent about it. And just the line on the newspaper says, "I'm as gay as it gets." It's just Morrison's he's hilarious. He's funny as
Well, he
fuck.
was using it to
He's
lash
playing-
out at his girlfriend too, which
That's
is kind of shitty.
Beast is the trickster character of these X-Men. Morrison is obviously a chaos magician. He knows the Kabbalah. He speaks on it like crazy. When he makes these characters, when Grant puts these characters together, they place them on the Tree of Life and where they fit. And Beast is on the Sephira of Hod. Beast is the trickster. Right? Beast is the smart, intellectual trickster. It's always one in hand. Loki's super fucking smart. That's why don't think that in this last episode of Loki that he's a buffoon. You know what I'm saying? Like, he knows exactly what he's doing. Smart, intellectual, trickster characters. And that's where Beast is here. The other big thing, the big miss for me is, and I really appreciate Grant wanting to put in a Middle Eastern character, especially after 9/11. But yeah, it's very not cool to your first Islamic. I don't know if Dust is Islamic, but your first Middle Eastern character is going to have sand related powers. It's just a bit like, I don't know. It's just like if you have like some like new white mutant who just makes money or whatever. But anyway,
He just shoots money out of his hand.
After everything we've talked about tonight, overall, what are you still got some good thoughts about this run, Verno?
Certainly. I think we're gonna get into the art, so I guess I'll skip over on that because it used to bug me how much it switched around. But I would say after this reread, I'm with you. This is my favorite X-Men run that I've read. I've missed some things, but I've read all the Claremont stuff, and it's on par with the Claremont and Byrne stuff, at least I would say. And I think there's a lot of people. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. There's Eric Lewald, when X-Men the Animated Series was starting up, he wrote like his manifesto for that. And it was all about how we are taking over a product that has been kicking ass and taking name for 20 plus years. We don't need to change anything. We're not reinventing the wheel here. And by the time that Morrison takes over, that's no longer true. The X-Men wasn't the brand that it was. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think this was the perfect time to kind of reinvent the X-Men wheel. And I think he did a kick-ass job with it. It's what turned me off at first, but it's what turns me on now, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Speaking of turning on, I realize that this question is kind of leading into probably some people's final thoughts when we rate the entire series. So before we get to that, we got some quick little bits we want to get through real quick because it's been 2 hours. You remember we used to, with a lot of editing by me, these used to be like 30, 40 minutes. So I love this new format, y'all. Thank you so much for all being here tonight for Comics Revisited. Favorite character. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions here and give me a quick answer with a quick explanation. I want to know your favorite new character created by Grant Morrison for this run, and I want to know your favorite interpretation of Morrison from an established character already. Got it? Get what you get what I'm digging? I'll go ahead and start. Give you guys some time to think. My favorite new character is Phantom X. I had to think about it because I thought it might be Quentin, but it's Phantom X. That character is amazing to me. So much more can be done, and a lot was set up by Morrison for other writers like Rick Remender. My favorite interpretation of Morrison on a classic character might actually be Cyclops. I think this is the first time I've ever actually fucking liked Cyclops. Like, honestly, like I've always thought Cyclops was the Boy Scout. He was the nerd. I didn't like him. You know, when Wolverine's trying to punk him out, whether it's the animated series, whether it's the comic book, whether it's the movies, when Wolverine gets a nice jab in on Cyclops, he looks at Xavier and he's like, Professor, you know, like this took that.
Get away with that, Professor?
This made me feel a little bit more relatable as far as Cyclops goes. So I'm going to go Phantom X and Cyclops. What about you, Verno?
I got to go Beak for my favorite Morrison creation. It's tough. There's so many good ones, but we already talked about it. To be that ugly and to be that cute, and I find I like characters that just have that like inner goodness. You can't question Beak's morals. But and him and Angel's relationship. That's a very like I know couples like that where you've got the one that she's had a rough life and she's like, come on, like, let's get drunk. Let's have sex in the woods. Nobody's going to see us. And just the peer pressure stuff that comes along with that is so interesting. So I love that. And then my favorite existing character is got to be Emma Frost. So I didn't really care for her before that. And now she's one of my favorite characters. And she's better in this, especially the first half of it, than anything that I've ever read with her in it, I think.
Nice. And Morrison's pulling from the thread that she became a teacher in Generation X, and so like she's gone beyond that villain, but there's this probably the best character work done on a character is Emma. And that's why the most outstanding legacy for Morrison's run is the work done on Emma Frost, in my opinion. So really, really nicely put. You out there in the chat, we want to know as well, your favorite new character created by Morrison for New X-Men and your favorite existing character that they worked on. What about you, Brian?
Okay. The favorite new one, it's so many to choose from. But I have to also go with Phantom X, partly because I know we're going to talk about Legacy too, but that Uncanny X-Force run is up there in the best X-Men stories. That Rick Remender Uncanny X-Force. It's kind of long, but it's a super fun ride and it doesn't really slow down. And just all of his different powers, there's so many different things you can do with all that stuff. And, he does, later on, he does some confusing things, splits into 3 personalities, I don't know. He's just awesome. There's just so much to work with there. But I did also write Beak's grandson down. That dude was just awesome. Right. And Here Comes Tomorrow. My first thought was like, wow, Beak went hardcore. And then I was like, oh, it's his grandson. Damn.
I'll never live up to granddad.
I love that.
Right?
He's still got that. He's still got the goddamn bat.
Yeah, right.
That was a problem. Joe Corallo has such a problem with that fucking bat. It just cracks me up.
Yeah, that's funny.
I'm like, we all like baseball, Joe. It's okay. Come on. Anyway, I had the Yankees game going, and then when the internet problems happened, I turned it off. So someone want to let me know if what the Yankees score is. We were tied last I checked. Brooks, you got an answer to the question? Oh, wait. Brian's not done. Sorry.
Well, so the classic character, and I'm not copying your answers, even though my answers are the same as yours. Cyclops, because nice. I thought Cyclops looked cool and his power looks cool, but I don't know. He never did much for me overall. Right. But this, the way they wrote him and all these, his reactions to things, and he's just, wrestling with these things, but he's still the hero, even though he starts wrestling with it. And that's kind of it's the butterfly effect thing for that last story. It's like he makes a different choice to unwrite everything. And that's how important he is to the overall thing. I thought that was a really cool, to me, that was kind of a cool statement that they made to that, to that story.
And to put it in perspective for some people, the X-Men that me and Brooks and Brian grew up with, Cyclops would never go to a strip club. Never.
No.
But look how badass Cyclops has been since, right? Now mutants aren't wearing Magneto was right shirts anymore. They're wearing Cyclops was right shirts.
Oh man. I'm out of style. Okay. Well,
you are. You're an old man.
At least you have the job.
Yeah.
Anything else, Brian, before I move on?
Well, it has nothing to do with the characters, but I did notice that at one point Wolverine had a soul patch. Were we going to talk about that?
That's Frank Quitely.
That Ultimate X-Men kind of carryover.
Yeah, it was right at Xavier's. It was the Frank Quitely artwork in particular. I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I liked it. He had it like Brooks said in Ultimate X-Men. I liked it. You don't like the soul patch in Wolverine?
No, I like these.
Wolverine's meant to be. Wolverine's meant to be sexy. Okay,
Brooks, he could have a full beard. I'd like to see
but
that.
but that was sexy in 2002. Verno was the little soul patch, man. This is the era of Linkin Park, bruh. You know what I'm saying? Like Wolverine's like the fucking front man of a
Wolverine's
new
got his
metal
headphones
band.
on. Crawling
Look like
in my
that director of
skin.
Cabin Fever, dude.
Hey, look, he should look like Eli Roth. Eli Roth's a
There you
cool looking dude. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Speaking of cool looking dudes, Juju is here. Hey,
Yeah,
Juju.
she is.
Hey,
She made her
Brooks.
appearance.
Yeah, Brooks, what do you think? What's your answer? Favorite new creation by Morrison and favorite work on an existing character?
Well, I think my second answer is pretty obvious, but I think the new character, I actually like the Stepford Cuckoos a lot more after reading this, because they've had such a fascinating journey. Because they started out as basically like Emma Frost's little followers, like they kind of imitated her, they looked up to her, and then after Esme's death, like they kind of split up and they started doing their own things. Like I remember for a time, like they started dyeing their hair different colors. Like one of them went redhead just to piss Emma Frost off. Like, so I think, and like the idea of like this kind of like group of telepaths who are like super powerful together, I thought was like a neat idea. Very Grant Morrison idea, I think.
I wish we could have got a little explanation on
Jean
that.
Grey.
Sorry.
I think Jean Grey has some of the coolest moments in this run. Like Grant Morrison just goes all out with her. Like she can do just about anything. And she's not like possessed by the cosmic Phoenix Force, like per se. It's more like, kind of a manifestation of her own powers. Like I guess her secondary mutation in a way. But he uses her telekinesis in ways that I think a lot of writers wouldn't think to use it. And her telepathy too.
Hell yeah.
Like the whole thing of her like bringing Xavier's mind back together after Cassandra like basically kills him. Like that was like a power play there.
Yeah, right.
And like she has a lot of power plays in this run too.
So now we're going to get on to a discussion on the artists. You out there in the chat, I want to know what is your favorite artist on this Grant Morrison New X-Men series. For me, my favorite artist is Frank Quitely. It's obvious for me. But I want to speak overall on the consistency of the artwork. At first, it really does feel like Marvel thought Quitely was going to be able to handle it. And maybe Van Sciver was going to be his alternating artist, but that didn't pan out. And obviously scheduling became a big deal. And it's very inconsistent in book 1. Okay. But from that point forward, they got the idea right. And it's an idea that they use now a lot, that they didn't use a lot back then, was having alternating artists on arcs. So I thought that the last 2/3 of this whole run was actually better artistically as far as consistency goes, because each arc had a different artist. So it was consistent for its own time. Chris Bachalo did all of Assault on Weapon Plus. Phil Jimenez did all of Murder at the Mansion, did all of Planet X, right? Frank Quitely comes in and does Riot at Xavier's. Like it really it tightens up for me. So I want to know your favorite artist on the entire run and just your overall thoughts on the consistency of the artwork. Verno?
It's Quietly for sure is my favorite. And it's just like what you said, man. Like the fact, like they broke it up by arc. Like I appreciate that. You see that a lot more in modern comics. As far as Ethan Van Sciver goes, I think you said he wasn't very significant. To me, he is. Like to me, I wish if it would just went back and forth between those two. Like I love his take on the characters and how they look. Like Wolverine's face in particular stands out. But I mentioned earlier.
I'm going to say this. He draws Wolverine too tall. I'm just going to say
well, there's that. Well, he's using a fisheye. And that's part of it. That's why you know what I mean? That's why you get that lanky.
He does do that fisheye thing. I like that.
Which I noticed Igor Cordy, maybe it was like in style at the time, but Igor's got a couple of
this is the era of Puff Daddy videos, bro, right? So
right. Igor's original, his first couple issues, I really like. Like I've grown to like really actually dig his style. What bugs me later on is his figure drawings. Like Phantom X has these weird short little arms and stumpy body and all that. Super weird, but Fire Art and Jimenez is incredible. Everything he does, is fire as hell. So I don't think there's a bad artist on the entire run. John Paul Leon is incredible.
Oh,
It's one of the best runs of X-Men art, and it took me a long time to appreciate that, honestly.
What about you, Brian?
It's Frank Quitely, and I noticed somebody brought up. I mean, because partly, it's the best pseudonym in history. Frank Quitely is just amazing. But yeah,
quite frankly,
yeah. Yeah, I agree that they were having to adjust through the first arc, so it was pretty choppy, because I do remember my first read through was like that was hard to get through because of the constant switching up and everything, but it does level out. And honestly, it's not like they were using slouch artists. It's not like the fill-ins were people they were just bringing up and trying out or anything like that. I mean, it was all pretty established artists. But my second favorite artist from that was those two one-shots by John Paul Leon and Bill Sienkiewicz. Those are so
lost cool. John Paul Leon, unfortunately.
Yeah, R.I.P. Yeah,
fantastic. We're going to be covering Earth X as part of Comics Revisited Season 3, so nice. Fantastic work from him. So
yeah, and I don't know, yeah, and like I know I already said, but that Silvestri stuff on the last one, yeah, so good.
I mean, I just bought all of the original Cyberforce books, man. I'm about to go so deep into this shit you don't even know. Brooks, what about you? What do you think about the art? Who's your favorite artist? What do you think about the consistency?
I like Frank Quitely's. I like some of his characters more than others. Like, I think his Emma Frost is really good.
Yeah, I wonder why, young man.
I think he just captures the essence of the character better than most.
Yes,
artists.
Right. We can say that.
She always has that fucking scrunched up kind of pouty face.
Yeah.
She's long, slim, elegant limbs,
And she's got the whole tits out attitude. Yeah.
Right,
yeah. The long, perfectly straight.
How does that work? It's tape? It's some kind of mutant tape.
Yeah. Emma Frost has always been her costumes are deliberately provocative, I guess, because that's just kind of part of her character. It's she likes to draw attention to herself.
Yeah.
I think Quitely captures that. I think. But I like Bachalo's stuff too.
I do.
He's done other X-Men. He's done X-Men in different runs too. So I've always kind of liked his work on X-Men.
He had a really good run before this with Steven Seagal. I really feel like the Joe Kelly Steven Seagal run is supremely overlooked. So there you go. But yeah, really good picks, Brooks. Good picks. I remember at the time, by the way, in those early days where Igor was coming in to do the fill-in art, that book was so late, we didn't give a shit who was drawing it. We just wanted to know what the fuck was about to happen, right, Brooks?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the letters real quick. So it's Comic Craft, and that's Richard Starking's company, and he did all of Marvel's shit back then. And it was Saida T who did the lettering here. This is what I want to mention in particular about the lettering on this one is Marvel, especially with the Ultimate books at the time, went to this whole lowercase type thing, right? Where it was going to be the print on the lettering. The lettering font would be like the print of a book, right? So there would be it'd be undercase except for capital letters and shit, right? And most comic books, especially up to this point, were all done. But there were other things like Todd Klein kind of broke some ground. I hate the fucking lettering in New X-Men. Let me tell you this. We get this same idea with what Clayton Cowles is doing on the X books right now, but it works. In this day, they didn't know how to fit this font onto a fucking word balloon. And it bothers me. The empty space, and it's not empty space that makes it feel organic. There are certain letterers that can make, whoever lettered Tom King's Batman run, for instance, or his Mr. Miracle run. I think that was Clayton too. They know how to make it fit in the word balloon and make it feel organic. This doesn't feel that way. It feels like a word balloon is there, and then there's text from a fucking book just copied and pasted into it. I fucking hate the lettering in this book. Do you have any thoughts, Verno?
No, bro. I'm gonna have to look through it. I did not notice anything. I'll have to look through it.
Well, it was on the rundown, young man, but whatever. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, this one stumped me a little bit because when I saw it on the rundown, then I went back and was trying to see what what thoughts I would have had on the lettering, because nothing jumped out at me when I read it. I mean, but like I did notice that they would, like when Magneto was projecting, you know, and things like that, they would put like sharper things around the balloons. So I thought, I mean, you know, they were definitely doing some things to try to affect it. And, you know, like when Magneto says the master of magnetism, they made it, you know, real old school comic booky looking and everything like that. I thought there were a couple clever things put in there, but it's kind of hard these days.
The letterings, I just noticed the lettering's different in the first book. It's all capitals. And even in the second book, it's in the middle of the second book. It gets to this. I don't know if you can really see it very well, but like, it just looks like they just copied and pasted fucking internet text onto a fucking word balloon. It doesn't feel natural or organic to me. It really took me out of it, man. And lettering's something I look at, but like, God, it's actually really good in the first book. So whoever, Saida T, whoever the hell that was, actually did a good job. There's one of those annoying ass pages, by the way.
Right.
God.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know. We're kind of spoiled on lettering today with people like Aditya and, you know, and like Clayton Cowles and a lot of those
Jim
folks.
And Todd Klein, the goat, right? The lettered the Sandman, you know. Brooks, you have any thoughts on lettering? Probably not.
No, it's so funny that you're such a lettering nerd now.
It's not. It's a part of the art.
I never paid attention to lettering.
No, I did not notice that the lettering was off in any way.
Well, get ready. We're about to start talking about the fucking lettering on Comics Revisited. Okay, it's a new bit.
I will say,
we're doing lettering now. Huh?
I never don't notice Aditya Bidkar's lettering now. I'll be reading something. I'm like, oh, God damn it, that's Aditya Bidkar. And there it always is. I will say, you've got me noticing that.
Hassan Osman El Hal's another one. Really fantastic letterer. Yeah.
I guess having a hard to pronounce name helps you as a letterer.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless your name is Todd, and then it's easy. But
I had to credit Haas for that, because like I found his magazine, the Panel by Panel. Yeah. You know, and then he was talking about that, and him and Aditya actually have a podcast called Letters and Lines.
Yeah.
And it's not all about lettering, but they get into it. They get pretty nerdy about the lettering. It's
real shit.
It fascinating.
It has an effect on your reading. Okay, so moving on. What is this book about? What's the themes? I'll start a little bit, and then I'll let you guys continue on. It's obviously evolution. It's the X-Men. It's supposed to be about that, and that's something Morrison really understood. And it's about the idea of the next generation taking over. What is that like? Morrison said in Super Gods, I wanted to do a story about how crazy people will get about killing their own children. Basically, what we're dealing with right now in the world, in America in particular, with differing points of views that are very generational right now, right? You got this older crew, you got this younger crew, you got people stuck in the middle, and life's not binary, okay? And that's another thing I think Morrison's making a point of in this. And the idea that we can look at the younger generation and just think, y'all are stupid and inexperienced and we don't know what it is, and we will go so far and beyond to actually kill our children. Do you get what I'm saying? To cut them down, say their ideas are stupid, that the next wave of thinking, like there comes a point where you realize, like Dave Chappelle said in his bit that he did about the George Floyd stuff, he released it was like, what it was like 8:28 or 8:48, something like that, however long it was or whatever. But he said, it's not on me anymore to fix this. My generation doesn't have any ideas. They didn't work. It's on the younger generation. That's what Morrison's trying to get across to me in this book. It's about evolution. And it's not just evolution of humanity, mutant kind, artificial intelligence and machinery. It's evolution as far as society goes. There is a new wave of thinking coming up at any moment. And you look at the clashes in the 60s, you look at the clashes today. These are moments where generational thinking clash. And it's so crazy how quick we are to kill our babies when it comes to that. And I'm not saying that every Zoomer out there has a brilliant idea about how to fix the world, because I don't think they do. But I don't think we need to discount them, because us and the generation beyond us, above us, like our ideas didn't work. You know what I'm saying? So like, why discount? Why kill our babies? And that's a problem with evolution. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I want to know, what do you think what do you think Grant's trying to say with New X-Men, Verno?
Well, I think you brought up great points, because that's kind of what I was thinking, was a generational thing. I was also thinking like how young minds are molded, right? And how it's the older generation, like Magneto / Zorn / Xavier, trying to mold these young minds, but then they're so easily kind of manipulated by one of their own, Quentin Quire. So I thought that the whole generational thing, definitely a big part of it. And then I recently got engaged. So I think the whole relationship, and I kind of touched on it earlier, with the It Takes Two kind of a thing, and just people change, people grow. You got to keep working on relationships, not just marriages, but your friendships and all that, or else things will drift apart and people will become two different people, kind of a thing.
Nicely put, Verno. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's nice.
I appreciate you.
You're a true pop culture philosopher, my friend. What about you, Brian? What do you think this book's about?
I do have a couple of things, but yeah, the main thing I keyed on was the evolution piece, like you were mentioning, because it starts off with, Cassandra Nova showing Neanderthals and and all that stuff. But it made me think, like, so basically they're establishing mutants as an actual threat, which almost kind of undercuts Xavier's whole philosophy, like that we can become integrated with humans when you're effectively going to be taking over, and they're dying out. So,
Morrison wanted to get away from that. Remember, Morrison wanted to get away from the idea of good versus bad, human versus mutant, and the idea of a new culture rising up. What would that look like? And I think Morrison's a prophet. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Morrison contacted real, legitimate fucking aliens outside of time and space in 1996 in Kathmandu. We never know. We'll never know. But yeah, it's y'all really need just keep waiting, because we're building up to the Invisibles Teen Dog Shades comics revisited night. Brian, that's gonna be fun. Yes,
I am looking forward to that. Eager. So, but yeah, obviously that was, to me, that was just kind of the overarching story, throughout the whole thing. But I also picked up on a lot of different things for identity, just like for, building an identity, and because like he really brought in mutants that clearly could not fit into society, and how do they, integrate, and pass off as human, and how they deal with that, and they end up getting manipulated a lot.
Most of his mutants are like Morlocks, basically, right? Like delving into that. There's more mutants that don't have cool superpowers than there are that do.
Yeah, but he also deals with it in the later generations too. Like they're like Scott trying to figure out himself again. And maybe not so much identity, but dealing with trauma too. And a lot of these things, and Wolverine finding out more about his identity. I don't know, that seemed to be a kind of consistent theme throughout.
Yeah, and don't forget that this is all written post 9/11 for the most part. Like the majority of this is written post 9/11, and we know that had a big effect on Grant Morrison as a person. Plus, his or Grant's dad died around that time, and he lost another of his cats. And there's a lot, there's a lot of stuff in New X-Men that leads to its ultimate thematic conclusion, I think, in Final Crisis. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's funny when, to me, like when I first read it, I had no idea of any of the context around this, and so as you learn more, you can start seeing how those, like those events you were talking about in their life that happened around that time. It makes so much sense. When you're reading this, a lot of that just really comes through.
And the fact that Morrison's in a particular spot where they're not happy. They're not satisfied. They haven't met their wife yet. They haven't hit that level yet. This was the moment where people realized Morrison can sell a book, because the sales were very strong throughout, and a lot of that had to do with Mark Silvestri. You know what I'm saying? Like the artists that were attached to it. But Morrison is a name that commands attention, and especially in these days, like 100%. And Morrison describes writing New X-Men as being a prison. that they just could not wait to escape out of. And that's sad because I really feel like Morrison held themselves back on this book because of it and because of editorial influence and butting heads with Bill Jimenez and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that even in that Perch, Joe Corallo, and I think the dude's name is Larry something maybe, even in that bashing of this entire run they did, they recognized all of that about it. You know, what about you, Brooks? What's this book about? What's Grant trying to say?
Well, I think like kind of an overarching theme is the need for acceptance, and like that's kind of like always been a thing in the X books. Like really the most dangerous enemy to the X-Men is the whole stigma attached to, you know, what they are and their existence, and you know, humanity's feeling their need to compete with them somehow. And like they need, I think the whole idea of the rebranding they're doing is they're trying to be more accepted. They're trying to, you know, prove like we're not just a bunch of guys in tights running around fighting supervillains. Like we want to use our abilities, our mutant abilities, like what we have to help humanity. And, you know, in that way, that's kind of always been Xavier's goal, is to like make it so that mutants and humans work together. Like mutants use their powers to help humanity, and humanity uses their power to help mutants. And all the ships rise, you know. And it's throughout, like, especially in the early issues, you know, you see Beast and Cyclops working with some police officers, and there's kind of some like awkwardness. And like when the human attack, there's these groups of people, like press people, and some of them are like, you know, intentionally, you know, they're there basically to slam the X-Men and make them look bad. And then like, I think one of them like eventually like comes up to Gene, he's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I was planning to just fucking, you know, slam you and make mutants look bad. But, you know, like this whole experience has kind of changed my perspective. And I think that's like the goal. That's the goal. Xavier's always been Xavier's true goal, is to like make it so that humans realize they need mutants, and that mutants, that they need humanity, because they're the same. Mutants are humans, but just like, you know, just a slight quirk to them.
Yeah. Nicely put, Brooks. Let's move to Legacy real quick. We've already touched on this. There's so many characters and ideas and concepts that have carried on from Grant that have been picked up by recent writers, including Jonathan Hickman. My biggest idea on Legacy for me is Grant wanted the mutants to be a culture. They didn't want them to be just another like feared and hated group. Grant wanted to explore the idea, what would it be like if the gay community rose up and became the most popular culture out there? What if it was like, you get what
Jungle Carnation was about?
Yeah, any of these subcultures, what if they just rose? What is it going to be like when we hear a new generation come out with new ideas, completely new ways of thinking? How will we deal with that? How will we understand that? And what will mutants be like when they're not just these handful of 20-something-year-olds in New York training and going out on superhero missions? What if we made this an actual culture that was rising up? And that is something that is so profound now. You look at the Matt Fraction run with Utopia. You look at what Hickman and company are doing right now with Krakoa. It all started with Morrison. This is a new generation of writers and creators that grew up reading this and loved it as much as me and you did, Brooks, at the time, and want to get back to it. And they don't want to ignore it. And they don't have, when Morrison left Marvel, they announced at San Diego Comic-Con they were coming back to DC before they had actually told Joe Quesada. And there is legitimate documented, there's a fight that broke out in the halls of San Diego Comic-Con where Joe Quesada was screaming at Grant Morrison about the betrayal. But Grant kept giving all these great ideas and pitches that they denied. But we got the filth and 7 soldiers out of it. You know what I'm saying? I think that Grant went on to do better work. I think it was important for Grant. Here's another part of the legacy. First of all, the mutants as an actual culture overtaking, right? They tried to get rid of that with the 198, House of M, all that shit, right? It didn't work. This new band of creators, they understand that Jonathan Hickman is a high concept creator. He picks on some of these things that Grant laid out and has developed them even further. And other characters, other creators have taken these characters and developed them, like Jason Aaron and Benjamin Percy with Kid Omega and with Rick Remender and Phantom X. But another part of the legacy is the idea that doing books that you want to, like having your voice be a big part of it, right? Trying to establish something beyond the norm. That's another thing. I think that this is a bold statement that was made by Grant Morrison, by Marvel at the time. But it also just tells us, trust your creators. What do you think the legacy of this book is, Verno?
I'm like sitting here like I'm watching you on YouTube. I'm so wrapped up in it. That was great shit. I was thinking more along character lines, but you got me thinking about how like it's affected the real world, this whole mutant culture, and you brought up like the gay community, and it's something that I had never got. I never realized how big the X-Men was to certain portions of the gay community until I started this podcast and got on the internet more. But that has really like blown up. Like the X-Men are such a huge part of that community, or the community has parts of it that love the X-Men. Anyway, so I think that came out of Morrison. Like I think he affected the real world by making it more like that. But I was thinking more along character lines. Like he just dumped so many characters and ideas that are still being used today. We brought up the Vault and everything Hickman's doing. Like Hickman, I don't think they would have let Hickman just reinvent it without the success of the Morrison run. Or maybe he wouldn't have had the ambition to do that. But character-wise, the Cuckoos, Quentin Quire, we need more Beak, we need more Angel. But other than that, that's kind of where I was thinking along those lines with it.
Yeah, I mean, those characters lasted, those concepts lasted too. Like the idea, maybe not secondary mutation, but for instance, the character of Zorn. Like, what's up with the new Zorns? It's kind of related to what Hickman did in the Ultimates, with 2 different Zorns, but Zorn is too good of a character just to allow it to be just Magneto, right? And the other idea on Legacy that I really wanted to touch on that I kind of lost my thought on, but now I remember it, is that this was very important, I think, for Grant Morrison to go to Marvel and feel like they were in prison or pigeonholed, because it led to an amazing run at DC post this. Morrison's work in the 80s and 90s at DC is amazing. My favorite work from Grant is still The Invisibles, right? And Animal Man and Doom Patrol and JLA. Reading JLA is like going to church for me, right? I love that shit. But this was so important for Morrison to kind of deal with this at this time, and it led to some amazing work. We're talking We 3, 7 Soldiers. We're talking about that fan-fucking-tastic Batman run. And if anybody can ever reinterpret the mythology of Santa Claus, it's fucking Grant Morrison. What is the legacy of this book, Brian?
That's hard to follow up. Because like Verno, I was thinking more along the lines of characters and the world, everything. But yeah, that's very well said. One thing, like, because I guess that was kind of how I see the legacy, because that's what my experience is from reading X-Men. I don't have this long continuity of reading the X-Men. I stopped reading the X-Men in 1990. Claremont was still writing it.
You came back, things were different, bruh. You were like, what the fuck is going on with my X-Men?
I remember reading a couple issues in the 90s, and Colossus like died from a virus, and I was like,
that's right before the Morrison run.
Yeah. I was so lost, and I was like, I can't get back into this.
For years.
Okay. Yeah. So I caught the tail end of a year-long story, so that's probably why I was confused. Then so I had to go back and read this, and I wouldn't have known what that legacy was. And so by the time I went back and read it, they were I didn't realize that they weren't using any of this stuff until I was kind of getting back into it, because yeah, I totally agree. And that was originally going to be a Marvel book. But yeah, it's, yeah, I don't know. I couldn't have said better than what you were saying. Like, I mean, I just, the X-Men has always been kind of like Jeleni's saying, a touch point for, minorities and subcultures and things like that. Cause it's, it's the complete underdog story from a culture perspective.
That's why I can understand what Grant was trying to do with the Beast stuff there. It doesn't age well. That's the only thing. No. I think of the time it worked, but it doesn't work. Like, let's show out Jeleni. He's part of the PCP crew, by the way. Join us all. Hopefully, Brooks, if you remember, Brian, if you remember, Jeleni, if you remember, join us for the 6th anniversary PCP stream coming up on Thursday night. Thursday is the 6th anniversary of Pop Culture Philosophers. Jeleni says X-Men is a cultural touch point for every generation, from the civil rights and the LGBTQ plus communities. I am so glad I had an opportunity to enjoy this specific story. And yes, Brooks can attest that Jeleni was there with us reading this month to month, eagerly anticipating every single issue. What's the legacy of this book, Brooks? You're the biggest X-Men fan out of all of us, I think, because you've read it consistently for so goddamn long. You made it through some bad stretches, my bruh.
I still am. But yeah, well, I think the extending cast of characters in the X books is one of the legacies of this. Like the idea of the school, the idea of Xavier's Institute as a school is like something that has stuck with the X books, I think, since this run. Like even Jason Aaron, he did Wolverine and the X-Men in kind of the same vein, except it was after the schism, so it was like Wolverine is running the school instead of Xavier or Cyclops. But yeah, that's kind of stayed with the X-Men. Like there's always a group of young mutants learning, like kind of a potential talent pool to draw like potential future X-Men from. And like this idea that it's always going. Like there's always more new mutants to find, new powers to learn how to use. There's always something new waiting around the corner. I think that's kind of like the real legacy of this the X-Men.
That's something you always get in Morrison's work in particular. There's always something new right around the corner. There's always something right coming up, something new. And you either evolve, change, or you fucking die. You know what I'm saying? And that is so an appropriate lesson for all of us. And it's throughout Morrison's work. And well said, everybody. Well said. So now it's time for the ratings. So we're going to do this nowadays like we do PCP Movie Night. Out of 5 possible you digs, what do you give the entirety of the Grant Morrison era of New X-Men? You out there in the chat, I want to know, out of 5 you digs, what do you give it? And you digs are worth a whole lot more than backlogs or slips or any other bullshit you can come up with. We're talking about true bona fide you digs here. I want to know, chat, what do you think? And Verno, what do you give it?
4.69, dudes.
69, dudes.
I can't give it a 5 because we've brought up quite a few nitpicky things. There are plenty of issues with it, but each issue I'm captivated. I love the shit out of it. So 4.69, and that's a solid 69.
I like that. A solid 69 is the best 69 you can possibly have, right, Brian?
Better than a wet one.
Yes.
Brian, what do you give it?
I go with 4.5. It's
you're not going to quite take it up to. You're not going to quite take it up to 0.69. You're just a point.
No,
I like that.
I don't want to steal that thunder. No, that's a good one. I can't give it a 5 because it's like I said. There's just a couple things kind of nagging there, but I feel like from my perspective, it brought a whole lot to the X-Men overall, and we wouldn't have some of the cool stories we had today without it. And I do think that, as part of the manifesto that they wrote was, really, leading into the Claremont and those runs. And I thought those parts that he lifted from that and did were brilliant.
Yeah,
So,
I think so too. So many other writers have tried to capitulate or kind of like spin off of the Phoenix Saga or, Days of Future Past, but nobody quite like Morrison, right?
Yeah, right.
Nice, Brian. I thought you had more to say. Brooks, what about you?
Sorry.
I give this a 5. Like,
Damn.
diving back into this, like I loved it a lot. I loved it more than when I originally read it. Like, I found it a lot more coherent. And having had more experience with Morrison's work, like I can see now that it is a bit more restrained than his usual stuff. But I think that kind of works to its advantage. The way it makes it a little more, makes it a little easier to understand, I think. But it does still have some of those wacky high concepts that he's known for. And I just dove right in, and I just issue. Like I just couldn't put it down at some points.
Mm-hmm.
So then that's what I think that's what a good comic book run does. It makes you just like not be able to stop yourself from picking up that next issue.
We never didn't want to pick up the next issue at the time, right, Brooks?
Yeah.
I'm going 4.5. I'm going to go along with Brian. I don't think it's the greatest comic book Grant Morrison has ever done, but I do think it's the best X-Men comic book I've ever read, which means that I think that the best X-Men comic book is a 4.5, not a 5, you digs, because I don't take it too seriously. It's not Star Trek. It's not Fantastic Four. It's not the New Gods. Let's get out of here. Come on, right? It's not the Invisibles. But I like it. 4.5, I think, is solid. It's a quintessential X-Men run that, regardless of the reason why, maybe it's because the current creators read it just like we did, but it has a lasting impact, not just on X-Men, not just on comic books, not just on the character of Grant Morrison's writing, but it has a lasting impact on me as a fucking person. And I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison. They are by far my favorite writer. That was the end of that sentence. It wasn't favorite writer of comics or favorite writer of superheroes. Grant Morrison is my favorite writer of all time. And I know we're talking about Moses. We're talking about Isaac Asimov. We're talking about Michael fucking Crichton. Grant Morrison is a big deal to me. And this is one of their best works, in my opinion. A great reinterpretation of the X-Men, the franchise, making it work, making it stick. 4.5 for me, 4.5 from Brian, a perfect 5 from Brooks, and a 4.69 from Verno for a PCP average of 4.69, dudes.
Convenient.
How convenient. That means Verno was right.
Right.
Correct. Yes.
At least
you
once.
won.
Let's take a look at the chat. Missing Link says 5 out of 5. 62 Lefty Blue says 3.69, dudes. Nick says, didn't see that coming with your 69 reference, Verno. Missing Link also says, Robbie, backlogs are rising in currency. Only against the slip, not against the Yadig. The Yadigs are actually rising higher, I would say. Jelani says 4 Yadigs and 5 Stepford Cuckoos. I think it's the Mitford Cuckoos, but it goes back and forth, right? Let's see. What else we got here? He says Beak takes it down a peg. The fuck, Jelani? That's why you're not on tonight, because you don't love fucking Beak enough. Big Herm says 5 Yadigs. I was glued to my books at the end of time. At the time, I almost said I was glued to my books at the end of time. Whoa, Herm, you went deep into it.
Sounds like a Grant Morrison plot.
I was glued. I know,
the only
right?
way to read this run is at the end of time.
Great job, Grant. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Let's see. What else we got here? Anybody else? Robbie. Grant Morrison. Come on, bro. That don't make me send you more. Grant Morrison's my favorite writer of all time. I don't give a shit if you never send me anything else, 62 Lefty Blues. I got to stay true to who I am and what I respond to. There wouldn't be a Teen Dog Shades night, by the way, if there wasn't a Grant Morrison. Just so y'all know. All right, final thoughts and outro. I really appreciate everybody for sticking through tonight for this 3-hour stream. I was anticipating 2, not 3. I wasn't anticipating internet problems either. Thank you so much. I was in a little bit here and there. So Brooks and Brian and Verno, y'all, thank you so much for continuing the show when I was disabled. Verno is the host of a podcast, the Cerebros Podcast. There's a link in the description below. Somebody else, one of our mods, throw it out, please, the link, because Verno does a great show that's not just about the X-Men, but it is about the X-Men. But it's also just about comic books, pop culture in general. I have been on that show several times, including one time with Jim Mint, which was a great show, and I can't wait to be invited back on to Verno's podcast, but we can't do it on Wednesday. We can't do it on Wednesdays anymore. I'm busier, but we'll figure it out because it's a great podcast, Verno. You do a great job there, and you have really great thoughts on the X-Men. So why don't you just tell everybody your final thoughts tonight and tell us where to find you and all that jazz.
Yeah, it's the Cerebros. It was X-Men Comics and More. Now it's just Comics and More. Basically, I was a casual fan. Let me just say this real quick. I just got obsessed with Hickman's shit. And I was like, fuck, I can't stop talking about it. We just started a podcast just talking about Hickman's stuff. And then it was legit. It was your weekly reviews. I started watching them and I'm like, let me check out some more of these books. Start checking out way more books. And it's like, I can't fucking just stay focused on this X-Men stuff. So I've dropped. I mean, we still, if cool shit happens with the X-Men, we're talking about it. But I do weekly reviews and we have on guests and we talk comics, man. And we have you on. We've had all sorts of cool shit. So
yeah, you can't get rid of the idea that you have a fantastic fucking name for your show, the Cerebros, bro. Like that's amazing. And yeah, you've had me, you've had Jim Mint, you have Bueller, you've had Bob, Bullseye Bob. You've had recently Nick, a couple times. Man. Nick the Suave from Comic Culture on your channel.
He's coming back in a couple weeks. We're talking about X-Men #1, and I want to bring up something because it's to me is interesting, man. We've been talking about we talked ahead of time. We've been struggling with Grant Morrison's pronouns this whole time, right? So I went into this. He announced that he was non-binary, or they announced they were non-binary and their pronouns are they, them a while back. So I went into this book kind of like looking to see if there is a person that is through their art, kind of like figuring some shit out. And right off the bat, did either of you or any of you think about like, first of all, he changed Cerebro's pronouns. Like,
yeah,
that's just that's interesting, right?
Cerebro to
Cerebra.
Then they more or less gender swapped Xavier.
Yeah.
Cassandra Nova is a gender swapped Charles Xavier.
And in the manifesto, Cassandra is called Charlie X.
Yep.
I just thought that was interesting. It's just to think about this person kind of
Verno, have you ever read The Invisibles?
No, man.
Bruh. Okay. 20 episodes from now. And I hope we have you back before then. But please join us for The Invisibles.
Oh my God. I would join you for
I want to see a neophyte's vision of The Invisibles. Trust me.
I want a list of accessible Morrison stuff to jump into. I've got JLA.
I can't give you a list of accessible Morrison stuff, but I can give you a list of Morrison stuff. Invisibles is not accessible. Go ahead and start fucking reading it, bro, because you need to read this like 4 times before you're ready to talk about it.
Let me ask you guys this. Like, okay, I've read this. I've read half of JLA, which I thought that was pretty accessible. And
it's very accessible. That and Batman's pretty accessible.
The first omnibus of Batman, I've read that, and then I read Final Crisis. Where does Final Crisis rank on like the holy shit, I can't understand what the fuck is going on chart of Morrison? Is that about as weird as it gets?
I think Final Crisis is one of the most Morrison-y books we've ever gotten from DC, and I also think that it's the second best Crisis event we've ever gotten.
I only read it
we're doing that one too this year, so
I can't wait for that because I didn't know what the fuck was going on for the majority of it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, bro.
That was by design.
Some other time, let's have a beer. Or 3 or 4 or 5, and I can explain Final Crisis to you, but it will take me like 45 minutes and several beers. I can do it. But no, that book is not very accessible, and it's tied into the Batman run. JLA is very accessible. I think it's the most accessible Morrison book we have is JLA because you get the tinge of Morrison's ideas, but it's still just enough of the run-of-the-mill superhero-y type stuff that is brilliant. Me and Jelani already did this on Comics Revisited. I would highly encourage you to check out that video if you haven't already. Me and Jelani did a great job on that. So
Definitely. Cool. I definitely will.
Or I should say, to sound less pretentious, Jelani did a great job at that, and I was just there. Anyway, Brian, final thoughts?
Well, I want to thank you for having me on the show. Because it's always great to go back and reread some of these things. We covered a lot of ground in this 3-hour show. So don't want to rehash anything, but I will just kind of summarize. I really enjoyed this run. This last time around again, and picked up some new things, and just really appreciated it. And it also helped me, understand where some of the Hawksbox stuff is going, and where it came from and everything. And that helped. I mean, that I thought that was really cool. I will say to earlier thing, Joe the Barbarian is a fairly accessible book. That one, and that one is the art in that is really solid. That's
Sean Murphy.
Sean Murphy. Yeah,
Joe the Barbarian.
Yeah, Joe the Barbarian is a brilliant fucking book. It's about a kid dying who has this fantasy. It's so good. It's so fun. Yeah. Have you ever read We Three? By the way, Verno.
Oh.
No.
You got to read We Three. First of all, regardless of whatever the fuck you were planning on reading, read We Three.
Gotcha.
3 issues, Morrison and Quitely. Done.
Perfect.
3 issues.
I'm all about it.
It's Homeward Bound, done by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely.
Nice.
That one I read on a plane. I don't always read.
It's a little different than Homeward Bound.
Did you cry in public? Yeah. Just shut up, Brooks. It's just a thing. It's just a thing to do.
Yeah, and I cried on the airplane.
Yeah,
and it was clear I was reading a comic book,
fucking time.
And I'm sitting there weeping, on an airplane.
I fucking love that book, and I hate it at the same time because it makes me so emotional. Speaking of making me emotional and me hating them for it, Brooks, final thoughts?
Wow.
It's like I don't have anything to plug. I'm just like a weird guy who reads a lot of comics and stuff. But I would highly recommend.
That's why we love you.
Station.
As part of
that was weird how you just synced up your link. Did you say that, or did you just play that?
I did that. I said
it at the same time because that was freaky how it synced up with the link.
Station.
Fucking insane. Oh,
we've been talking for 3 hours about a Grant Morrison book, and that's what blows Verno's mind.
I'll just leave that. This pen's starting to.
Anyway, Brooks, I do want to plug a couple things that you're going to be on. You ready for this? Thursday night is the 6th. Thursday is the 6th anniversary of Pop Culture Philosophers. I hope you join us for a live stream starting at 8 p.m. Central Time. I'll be live. I don't know who else is going to be there. Hopefully, Jelani, a little bit of Brian, a little bit of Brooks. Hell, Verno, if you want it, you can come in and chat with us and hang out. It's going to be a fun stream where we're celebrating 6 years here on Pop Culture Philosophers. The next night, Friday night, PCP Movie Night returns, kicking off Action Fest 2021 with Cobra, the Sylvester Stallone book. So go ahead. It's not that Cobra, but a different Cobra. It's so fucking dope, and I'm ready for it, y'all. You don't even know. All right. Thank you all so much for being here for Comics Revisited Season 3 as a live show. It's a book of the month type thing. We'll be back on the last Monday of July. It's July 26th. Me and Jelani and a gaggle of guests. We'll be talking about Infinite Crisis by Jeff Johns, because
a glorious gaggle of guests.
A glorious gaggle of guests. A godforsaken glorious gaggle of guests. But you know that me and Jelani have decided we're going to go through all the Crisis events. We've already done Crisis on Infinite Earths, and we did 0 Hour, and now we're delving into Infinite Crisis, which both of us really like. And Phil Jimenez did the art in that, and it's going to be a fantastic book. And me and Jelani, and we got 2 really exciting guests that we are working on getting here for that. You don't want to miss it. So that is Comics Revisited. Thank you guys so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. On behalf of me, Verno, Brian, and Brooks, I just want to say, Station, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us on the journey, and read up on Infinite Crisis. And see you next time, y'all. Thanks for rocking with us.